seen an unwarranted and unjustified tightening of financial conditions? I don't think we have yet. And have we seen a material reassessment of the outlook? It's on that question that I think we get a little bit closer to calling yes.
Although they are stuck between a rock and a hard place. I'm looking right now at Fed funds futures, 64 basis points of rate cuts through January 2021. That is what's being priced into the market. So that's more than 2 full rate cuts. And the question here is, are we going to face another taper tantrum if the Fed doesn't deliver, especially as you get the growth slowdown? On the other hand, could the Fed simply push more money into riskier assets, inflating what people think is potential bubble at a time of slowing economic growth, potentially being more harmful than helpful?
Japanese yen going out to new weakness of the last hour, 110.63 from a 133 earlier. By the dip, is it dead?
Not yet. And that's the problem. I think we've got to really flush out sentiment before you can start to say things are okay again. Look, Tom, equities are back to where they were at the end of January. Let's be clear about that.
Well, the VIX 23.28.
High yield spreads are back to where they were at the start of December. Okay? I don't think we've had this massive flush out just yet.
Apple shares up.
How tanned he looks?
Yeah, he looks fantastic.
From Barbados,
how was
it's just
it?
amazing.
Well, look, I heard you butcher the Open yesterday morning.
I did. Oh, no, I killed it.
As soon as I heard it, I gave the boss a call and said, "You want me back?" And they said, "Please, can you come back?" So I came back.
They begged. I
tried to do a Coventry accent, but I sounded like.
Is that what that was yesterday?
One of the extras in My Fair Lady with Audrey.
I just heard good morning, and then a load of coughing.
It was like Cockney instead of Coventry.
That's what he thinks he sounds like, John.
What do you call your accent? Somebody said they love your accent. What is
that what they said?
Is it Midlands?
I don't have a Midlands accent.
I don't know. I'm asking.
It's more of a draw between London and the Midlands. It's more of a draw.
There's a book.
Do you change your accent when there's lovelies around and you want to impress the women?
What do I turn up the volume?
Do you go posh?
No, I don't think I could. I don't think I could ever go posh. And in my experience, that's not what helps. Should we leave that there? Should we leave that there?
Jeez, I don't know. Where is this going? Forget about the markets.
I think most people like an edge. I don't think they
Pray tell, which accent is best advantageous?
So do you really want to go there?
They want more of like a bad boy.
Futures are up 11. Keep talking to me. You live from the market.
I will say, when it comes to buying the dip, Apple shares in futures are up more than 1% ahead of the market open. So, I mean, there you go. That's the buying the dip kind of thing.
Let's do some sports here. For 13 minutes yesterday, Liverpool looked almost human. West Ham could get relegated. They're like bad.
Do you know whose club that is?
Yeah.
Cameron Crisis.
Yeah, and Liverpool just for a moment slipped, didn't they?
Yeah, and then they came back and they won, which is what they've been doing game after game after game after game.
Are they the best team ever? I mean, like we talk about the 1927
No, they're not yet. They're not there. They're not there.
Okay.
Great team, one of the better teams of the Premiership era in the UK.
But what accent is that?
Which one?
The one you're talking right now.
Right, it's my accent.
Is that like your Clash accent? When you're
Posh doesn't work on the
Posh
ladies.
doesn't work. That's what we play the Clash.
Look, the last thing I am is posh.
Yeah, futures up 11. More data checks. Stay with us.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Discover Aer Lingus when you fly from London from $55.99 each way as part of a return trip. Experience this vibrant city and head to the coast for authentic Irish seafood and stunning scenery. Smart enjoys a short break in Ireland. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at aerlingus.com. Offer subject to conditions and availability.
If you're going to have NHS dental treatment, don't assume you can claim it for free. Not all benefits entitle you to free treatment. And if you claim when you're not entitled, you could face a penalty charge of £100, plus the cost of your treatment. Thankfully, the NHS Eligibility Checker will help you find out if you can claim for free. Then next time you're at the dentist, you'll know exactly which box to tick. Search Check Before You Tick online today.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
You know what it's like when you can't find your debit card? Panic. That's what it's like. Until you realise, as a Halifax Visa debit card holder, that you can freeze your card on the spot. Control your Halifax Visa debit card with the Halifax mobile app. Easy as.
You can only freeze certain transaction types. Terms and conditions apply.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg Radio. We're looking for the calm after the storm, after equities dropped their biggest drop since early 2018, February 2018 on the S&P 500 to be precise, the smallest of bounce backs on the S&P this morning, up by around about 7 points, positive 0.2%. In the bond market, Treasury yields grinding down close to all-time lows in the 24 hours previously. 137 is your yield on the 10-year right now, in and around 132 are your record lows from the summer of 2016. In foreign exchange, Tom Keane, the euro just a little bit weaker. Euro dollar coming down 0.2%, 108.35, just off the weakest levels of spring 2017 for the single currency.
Yeah, 2 hours ago, that was pretty angst-driven. I mean, the 10-year yield to 4 digits was a 134, and we've come back 3 solid basis points, as you mentioned, John. They're a better tape right now with futures up 9. We'll do more data checks, but really, I think it's almost headline to headline, and we haven't seen much. Really, we had some Italian headlines on the virus 3 hours ago, and maybe a little bit out of China.
Yeah, overnight, a little bit more guidance from corporates, but nothing that really moves the dial, Tom.
Yeah, very good. Vince Reinhardt with us right now. His contribution to economics has been extraordinary for years, with Chairman Greenspan running all of research at the Fed and, of course, with Mellon Asset Management. Vince, you know I've got to go to what President Lakota said yesterday, formerly with Minneapolis and now with Rochester, an extraordinary terse Bloomberg opinion column, which says, look, the Fed has room here to go 25 basis points right now. And at the end of the essay, he even said 50 basis points to get out front of this supply shock. Is that in the textbooks? Is that in Abel Bernanke or Mankiw or Krugman or any of the other textbooks that a central bank gets out front of a supply issue?
if you thought it was a permanent hit to aggregate demand and the equilibrium real rate had just fallen a lot, and you're worried about the zero lower bound to nominal interest rates, you should cut rates right away and cut them fast. We don't know that it's a permanent shock to aggregate demand yet. We don't know that it's a permanent shock to aggregate supply. And I would suggest that the President Koto should look at the calendar. The Fed's got 22 days before its next meeting. Pity poor Rich Clarida, who's got to be out front before then, but they should use all 22 days.
Let's go Fisherian, not Stanley Fisher, but Irving Fisher from a zillion years ago, and that's the linkage of all these things, inflation and interest rates and the real economy curve, the IS curve, the LM curve, all the mumbo-jumbo that you're expert on. How actually linked are they right now, given an exogenous shock like the virus?
You came to the right place, Tom. So
I did okay there?
Yeah.
I got to stay. Good.
Yes. So
maybe I should go to Barbados. That would be good. Okay.
Carry on, Vince.
The main point is what is the current policy rate relative to its long run or equilibrium level? If, in fact, this is a permanent shock to activity and the equilibrium rate has come down, the Fed doesn't have much space to bring the short rate below that. It can't provide all that much policy accommodation. That's why people are worried about how much there is. But it's probably almost surely too soon to make that determination. That's why you're supposed to wait a bit. The other part of it is it's a share shock. Normally, when you lower your policy rate, you hope to get some help from your friends in the form of your currency depreciating. Nobody wants their currency to appreciate. So J-PAL's got a limited room. Can't make a lot of space between the policy rate and the equilibrium rate. Can't get dollar depreciation. I would think that rather than getting in front of the problem, the Federal Reserve moving now would actually be leading the bandwagon. Heightening fears. Tell me how you would not lead with panicky Fed cuts rates by 50 basis points.
Next meeting, March 18th. The number you used, 22 days. The next 22 days, is that important, Vince? Is that what we're emphasizing here, that it's that important?
So get back in the DeLorean and go 22 days the other way. How did you feel at the beginning of February?
Felt a little bit better about the outlook,
We felt worried about China, but they seem to be getting their hands around everything. And now we've learned about a second inflection point. But remember the first inflection point, as Tom has shown, the picture on confirmed cases and deaths, that's flattening out. And if it continues to flatten out, I think people will be able to get an understanding that, in fact, it was a temporary shock.
Do you think it's temporary?
Don't know. I think yes and no. The yes part is the disruption to activity, the hit to global supply chains and demand. We can see an end to that. It will have a good-sized effect on China activity in 2020. That will be reflected in the rest of the world. Not so much in the U.S., by the way. We can talk about that. The more permanent aspect of it is it's out there. A new virus is out there. The good news is in an advanced economy, the mortality rate is very low. The bad news is it's very contagious. And now that it's out there in the ecosystem, it's going to be part of our seasonal flu.
So we don't know a lot of things about the coronavirus's spread, but right now markets are pricing in more than 2 rate cuts by the beginning of 2021. And to Max Kettner's point, what happens if the Fed doesn't deliver? Are we facing another taper tantrum? And is the market holding them hostage in a way?
It depends on where markets are the next time the Fed meets. By the way, in that pricing, there's only about a 15% probability that they do something at the March meeting. It's later in the year. So that's basically saying Jay Powell will announce, we're following this closely, of course. We care about this, but it's premature. And what will happen is it depends on where equity prices are. Financial conditions now are probably easier than they were at the start of the month when you consider how much long rates have gone down. Fed doesn't confirm that, then they won't stay there. But the question is, the Fed doesn't confirm that probably because equity prices find a bottom.
Well, let's pick up on something that you've mentioned earlier on in this conversation. Nobody wants to be the shock absorber in foreign exchange. The issue the Fed might have is they're about to be the shock absorber again. In Europe, we face the very real prospect that Germany and perhaps Italy as well, number 1 and number 3 economies on the continent, recession. Japan likewise too, and China going through a really, really soft patch. In that environment, can you imagine anything other than the dollar being the shock absorber? And what does that mean when the Fed meets?
What it means is that one aspect of financial conditions are tighter than it would be otherwise. It means that the Fed's going to see it harder to generate domestic inflation because the appreciation of the currency is going to keep commodity prices lower than they would be otherwise, keep import prices lower than they would be otherwise. And so I would take it as meaning the Fed's got room to stay where it is. You're going to hear them talk about the funds rate is in the right place to keep the economy in a good place. They eased 0.75 percentage point last year. They think they've put the funds rate 0.75 percentage point below its equilibrium. Unless they get convinced that equilibrium has come down, they probably don't see a reason to move it.
We just had a confab with the New York Fed here in New York like 3-4 days ago. I know Michael Ferroli, JP Morgan was involved. And so what did you come out of those recession papers? The set of Lyle Brainerd and Richard Clarendon, but the energy there of what do we do in the next slowdown given that we're at the zero bound? What was the thing that caught your ear?
I think the thing is there's nothing new on the list. You just do more of what you've done previously. And you move quicker in advance of that.
Okay, this is really important. John, this is a huge theme for John and I at Davos this year as well. What does move quicker mean?
Meaning that, remember way back in the day, they used to refer to Chairman Greenspan as quarter point out?
Yeah.
Because it would be
measured.
It would be a quarter
so
point.
So we go back to Arthur Burns where we're going to go 3/8 of a point?
Well, I think Ben Bernanke move more on occasion, and I think what it means is if they think they need to get to a place, they should get to that quickly. Okay. I don't think they know. They should have enough confidence to know what place they should be.
Okay, Vince Reiner, really timely as well with Mellon Asset Management today. Thank you so much. The Bloomberg NJIT STEM Report, always brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology, a top 100 national university, and the latest U.S. News and World Report college rankings. Learn more at news.njit.edu. Here's Bob Moon.
Tom, Lisa, Jonathan, good morning. Here's what's making news in science, technology, engineering, and math. Build a better voting machine and the world will beat a path to your door. On the other hand, just build a better vote trap, and the same is true, apparently. State and local officials have been trying to boost election security by buying enhanced electronic voting machines. But some of the pricier options being put into service may be no better when it comes to ensuring an accurate tally. Computer experts say many newer machines are almost as risky as the earlier ones. For example, one popular choice generates barcodes, which are in code that should something go wrong, humans can't read. And if there's a dispute or hackers strike, there's no paper trail to confirm the votes. Election security is getting increased attention after Russia's interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential race. Whether it's the kind of attention the American electorate would vote for, the first humans to arrive on Mars will be quaking in their space boots. We know this because of NASA's newest Mars lander, which has confirmed that Mars quakes, as the space agency calls them, and even aftershocks, are regularly jolting the planet. The seismometer attached to the InSight spacecraft detected 174 Mars quakes, including 24 that were relatively strong over 10 months. Either that or just beyond the red horizon, there are some very Martians stomping around. Seriously, though, it still has another year of planned geologic observations, unless they step on it first. That's the Bloomberg NJIT STEM Report. Tom, Lisa, Jonathan.
Bob Moon, thank you very much, sir. Thank you as always. Let's get you some headlines, some news worldwide, shall we? Let's cross over to Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Good morning to you, Michael.
Good morning, John, Lisa, Tom. President Donald Trump says he's optimistic about the prospects of making a trade deal with India. Trump commented during a news conference that just wrapped up seconds ago on the final day of his 2-day visit to the country.
They're going to be investing billions of dollars in our country, so that was the purpose of the trip also. We're all set for $3 billion worth of helicopters, the Apaches, and various other types. In addition to other equipment, they're buying that.
Trump met today with New Delhi's Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. After the news conference, the president and first lady will be honored with a lavish state banquet, and then they will head back to Washington. Italy is racing today to contain the first major outbreak of a deadly new coronavirus in Europe. The epicenter of the outbreak is in northern Italy, where the number of confirmed cases jumped from 3 on Friday morning to at least 229. Former Hollywood movie producer Harvey Weinstein remains hospitalized this morning after his conviction yesterday on sexual assault charges. Weinstein was said to be suffering from heart palpitations after the verdict. The district attorney of New York, Cyrus Vance, says the conviction is a step in the right direction.
These are 8 women who pulled our justice system into the 21st century by declaring that rape is rape and sexual assault is sexual assault no matter what.
The president of the National Organization for Women in New York says the verdict is a relief for Weinstein's many accusers. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John, Tom, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thank you very much, sir. Let me just guide you through a couple of things today and at the end of this week as well. Today, 3 p.m. Eastern, look out for a speech from Fed Vice Chair Richard Clarida down in Washington, 3 p.m. Get that in the diary. Then on Friday, and I think this is going to make it really, really interesting, on Friday's close into the weekend, Friday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, PMIs out of China. Yeah. That's going to make it a little bit dicey going into the weekend, Tom, for this market.
I'd also mention a small debate tonight, which may be a little bit firework. I'm hearing too many people tell me it's not Las Vegas, and I'm like, why not?
It's going to be fiery and perhaps a little bit more so for Senator Sanders as well. So maybe they'll share some of that fire on the debate stage later. In the equity market right now, we bounce back by 0.4%. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. The first board meeting for the Milan Cortina Olympics was changed to a video conference as authorities sought to contain the spreading coronavirus that has made northern Italy the focal point of the outbreak in Europe. The Italian Olympic Committee said instead of meeting in Milan, members of the newly created board of directors for the 2026 Games were calling in from their respective offices in the Lombardy and Veneto regions, the areas hardest hit by the virus. Meanwhile, sports authorities were holding emergency meetings on games in Italy's top soccer league. South Korean soccer authorities have indefinitely postponed the start of the 2020 domestic season. The K-League made the announcement after an emergency meeting in Seoul as the country grapples with the viral outbreak that began in China and has infected more than 79,000 people globally. With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Global news 24 hours.
If you're going to have NHS dental treatment, don't assume you can claim it for free. Not all benefits entitle you to free treatment. And if you claim when you're not entitled, you could face a penalty charge of £100, plus the cost of your treatment. Thankfully, the NHS Eligibility Checker will help you find out if you can claim for free. Then next time you're at the dentist, you'll know exactly which box to tick. Search Check Before You Tick online today.
This is the sound of a Halifax customer who used to worry he wasn't saving enough, but is now saving the change every time he hops on a bus. Switch on Save the Change, and when you use your Halifax Visa debit card, we'll round up to the nearest pound and put the difference into your chosen Halifax savings account.
Taking it for a spin has changed. Giving it a whirl has changed. With £500 towards a qualifying new Vauxhall with 4.9% APR representative when you take a test drive, the rules have changed. Book your test drive this weekend. Vauxhall. New rules Britannia. Allowance provided as deposit contribution on qualifying new Vauxhalls. Conditional sale and personal contract purchase only. Subject to status. T's and C's. 18 plus Vauxhall Finance. Registered by 2nd of April 2020. Search Try Your New Vauxhall.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Macy's up 2% in early trading after holiday sales helped quarterly earnings beat analyst estimates. Home Depot's up 2.7%. It rebounded from a string of disappointing results. With the fourth quarter, that topped analyst projections. Mallinckrodt, we're watching those shares as well, up 47% this morning after the company said it had agreed to pay $1.6 billion to settle claims arising out of the U.S. opioid crisis, with some of its units filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Futures, meanwhile, moving higher. European shares falling as investors weigh the latest coronavirus developments after a sell-off wiped out global equity gains for this year. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 16 points this morning. Dow futures up 143 and NASDAQ futures up 78. The DAX in Germany is down about 0.3%. 10-year Treasury down 2/30 seconds. Yield 1.37%. Yield on the 2-year 1.26%. NYMEX crude oil little change at $51.44 a barrel, and COMEX gold down 1.6% or $26.70 at $16.49.80 an ounce. The euro 1.0835 against the dollar. British pound 1.2956, and the yen is at 110.68. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Thanks so much. Greatly appreciate that. John Farrell, Lisa Bramwitz, and Tom Keenan. John, breaking news in the sense that we had Concha Lakota of Minneapolis and Rochester yesterday on a rate cut, and we get another Fed president out with an essay right now.
Yeah, our colleague Michael McKee just shooting this over to me. Bill Dudley, former New York Fed president, with the headline, "Coronavirus has freaked markets, not the Fed." That column out on the Bloomberg terminal right now. He goes on to say the greatest risk to the record U.S. economic expansion is an external shock that the Fed can't offset because it responds either too late or without enough force. That risk is rising. He goes on to acknowledge where rate expectations are at the moment, but he also emphasizes that expectations also indicate that the Fed wants to wait and gather more information. And for now, that seems like the right view. That's the view from Mr. Dudley on just a little bit of patience until we get a little bit more information.
And quickly, Lisa, at the bottom of the essay, he goes where you were earlier this morning with framing a 0.60 rate cut modeled in. Explain that, what you saw earlier.
The idea here is that the market is currently pricing in more than 2 rate cuts by the beginning of January. The question being, if the market does not get that, will that lead to a taper tantrum? Will the market force the Fed's hand? And this is sort of a key question that's leading people to just buy more bonds because the market has been able to jawbone the Fed into action.
We see a better tape. Futures up 17. To review that, we had a great tape this morning. We really gave way 2.5 hours ago. We've had a crawl back, and then in the last 20 minutes, we've got a nice velocity from flat to up 16 on S&P futures. Dow futures up 141. Yields correlate that as well. In yen, 110.67 is a weaker yen for those that keep score at home. Ken Leon with us now, CFRA. Quickly, on a domestic company doing better than good, and that would be Home Depot. They've averaged 25% total return per year for the last 10 years. Ken, within the review that we've just had on Home Depot, it's a huge advantage to be domestic, isn't it?
It is, especially for Home Depot, because they're going to benefit on consumer spending in 2020 that is likely to shift to more stay at home, perhaps not travel or be on cruise ships. And the results were good. It was a 17-cent beat on the quarter. The narrative for the whole year, though, is Home Depot's conservative. Yeah. They're actually 10 cents below the consensus. But I think the consumer is still strong. And we're in the green shoots of the spring selling season for home improvement, and that's Home Depot.
And we're seeing that, of course, in the bulbs outside the little hovel I live in. They're coming up earlier this year, folks. Than
Really?
Seen. Oh, yeah, they're coming up.
The hovel?
The hovel
Really?
that I live in. They're coming up. Pharaoh planted those bulbs. He did so. Dividends, Ken Leon, over 10 years. They go from 91 cents. They break $1 in 2012, and now they're up to $4.45. From 91 cents to $4.45 in a decade on a dividend. What does a dividend at Home Depot mean for shareholders?
Home Depot is kind of a unique company. You know, it has enormous cash flow. There's great return of capital and dividend increase, 10% hike again. But their debt ratio is very high. It's near 100%. And there's confidence in the public markets that Home Depot's business is resilient and probably resilient to the coronavirus.
How much is this being driven by low rates versus actual organic demand for housing?
I think they're intertwined because low rates means affordability, and that has spurred new housing. It also benefits existing home sales. All of that leads to new appliances and fixing up your home. But the storyline from Home Depot is 96% of the U.S. households don't move, and because of the rising prices for homes, they're perhaps looking to upgrade their kitchen or a master bathroom.
Ken, let's turn to the banks, the financials just quickly. The banks totally hammered in yesterday's session. It's been an odd one the last couple of years. Rates are heading the wrong way for the banks, especially over the last couple of months. Yet they've managed to churn out record profitability, record earnings year after year. Put that in a little bit of context and perspective for us. Just how bad is this rate situation right now for some of these big names?
Rates are important. 50 to 75% of total net revenue is net interest income. That's driven by rates as well as spread and volume. Volume of the businesses is good. The psychology of rates being possibly talked about of 2 rate cuts by January, that's why the banks are trading down.
And I will say, Tom, talking about banks, J.P. Morgan saying that they expect net interest income to drop this year to about $57 billion from almost $58 billion last year due to the decline in rates that we've seen.
Ken, very quickly here, on the dividends over 10 years of Home Depot, if you bought this stock 10 years ago, you've got roughly a 14% yield off of the current dividend. I mean, that's absolutely extraordinary, particularly if you take that out 2 decades. That's how you make money, isn't it?
It is. It's obviously running a good business and generating cash flow. I love the math to get 14% yield. That's great, Tom. And I think for investors, especially today, this is viewed as a really reliable large cap holding in your portfolio.
Ken Leon, thank you so much. Too short with CFRA, also doing great work for us on banks, as John brings up. John, I want to explain that again. It's so important. You buy a stock, it raises dividends every year. The yield 10 years from now, the dividends per share as compared to the share price you bought it at 10 years before. So you buy a stock for the 2% dividend. But if the dividend grows through the years, what's the dividend on your first purchase? Home Depot, 14% per year. That's not set enough. Mike,
Stocks as bonds. This has been the investment thesis of a lot of people recently.
Oh, yeah. It helps you have a great bull market. Absolutely. 100%.
And the question is, when does valuation get so high it doesn't make sense anymore?
2001 to 2011 is a little different math than what I just went over, but still, it's extraordinary. You okay over there?
Yeah, I'm just listening to you. I think it is extraordinary.
Put some aloe vera.
He was
That's
shocked.
what you need for the sun.
He was absolutely blown away.
He's just blown away.
I don't get burned.
It's just, that's true. It's because
he's
he's
nice,
at the Cabana.
Deep tan.
The Barbados rum with a little umbrella in it.
Without a posh accent.
Futures improve up 17. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg.
Discover Ireland's Wild Atlantic Way with Aer Lingus. Fly London to the west of Ireland from $32.99 each way as part of a return trip. Enjoy breathtaking scenery, taste fresh seafood, and explore wild coastal walks. Smart enjoys a short break in Ireland. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at airlingus.com. Offer subject to conditions and availability.
What am I saving for? My passion. Food photography.
I trained to be a landscape garden designer.
Open a food stall and sell my famous fish tacos.
I go to stuntman school.
I'd be a wedding planner.
I'd start a dog grooming business. Sorry, we'd start a dog grooming business.
What are you waiting for? Make your one day happen with a Fidelity Stocks and Shares ISA. Your capital is at risk. Tax rules may change. Full terms for our Stocks and Shares ISA are available on our website, 18 plus UK residents.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Switch to 5G on Vodafone. Pre-order the new Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra 5G by March 8th and get wireless Galaxy Buds Plus for free. With unlimited 5G data, you can post 108 megapixel photos and download videos impossibly fast. All on the UK's best mobile data network. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
5G subject to coverage in your area. MPerf test awarded Vodafone Best 2019 Mobile Internet Performance. Minimum term applies. See vodafone.co.uk.
When you're driving along a motorway, you should keep left unless you're overtaking, no matter how many lanes the motorway has. It's important. Keeping left makes the motorway safer, helps traffic flow more freely, and keeps us all moving. Because we all want to be somewhere. Somewhere like home. Just in time for another peaceful bedtime with the kids.
Put that down!
Follow the signs. Keep us all moving. Search Highways England Motorways to find out more.
This is the sound of a Halifax customer who used to worry he wasn't saving enough, but is now saving the change every time he hops on a bus. Switch on Save the Change, and when you use your Halifax Visa debit card, we'll round up to the nearest pound and put the difference into your chosen Halifax savings account.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade.
Get it right the first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
I think the U.S. is going in for a couple years of very, very strong growth.
The deficit by early in the next decade will start to become a real problem for the markets.
Finance.
The consumer is really strong right now.
We don't realize how good times are now.
Investment.
The biggest problem that people have in investing in stocks is that they get out of the market.
It's not supposed to be easy. Anyone who finds it easy is stupid.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Bloomberg Surveillance, not a special edition. We did that yesterday in the 9:30 hour with markets falling apart. It got worse. You saw that 1,000-point decline in the Dow. Let's save the chit-chat for the next couple minutes. What you need to know right now is a better tape. We had a good tape at 3 a.m., and then we came down. Some real angst about the 6 a.m. hour here. And John Farrow, we've come nicely back. Which metric on the screen are you looking at on the terminal to tell you it's a better tape right now?
The bond market, and I'm not seeing much of a bounce back, and that's what I want to highlight this morning. 137 is your yield on 10s, 125, call it 126 is your yield on 2s. No big move there, Tom, after a massive rally in yesterday's
session. I saw yen 110.64. We've come back a little bit weaker. Yeah, and Lisa, what do you see?
I'm looking at the NASDAQ right now because it's up 0.8% ahead of the open, but that's not that big of a bounce back given yesterday's absolute carnage. relative to what we've seen in recent years.
A lot of information flow this morning. Of course, we saw some Italian headlines as well. And, a good 18 hours ago, maybe the United States says don't fly to Korea. But, John, what are the headlines driving this? You say it's all virus. Is it the president talking about Senator Sanders in New Delhi?
No, we're not there yet. I don't want to attribute a reason as to why we're bouncing back this morning. I think what you need right now is a massive dose of humility. There is so much we don't know. And I'll tell you one thing we do know is that we're not out of the woods just yet.
The other thing we know is that the Federal Reserve is going to be the put. And I think that that's what a lot of people are relying on. The Fed, the BOJ, the BOK, you name it.
Well, we've had a lot of discussion here before we get to Julian Emanuel. And let's frame the central bank discussion here. We had Kachel Lakota yesterday saying, look, there's no reason not to cut 25 beeps. I'm sure it was music to the president's ears. And then John Bill Dudley comes out and really pushes against that, as did Vince Reinhardt moments ago on this show. We'll have that out on podcast as well. All of that gets us up to the vice chairman of the Fed, who speaks at 3 p.m.
I think if he could, he wouldn't do this speech a little bit later today. We've got, what did Vince say, 22 days?
Good luck with that.
22 days until the Fed meeting on March 18th. Tom, that's a long time in this environment right now, given the news flow and the information that's come through in just the last week alone.
And quickly here, the news flow, John, goes to what you mentioned, which is Sunday evening in America, which is those Chinese PMIs are the first real virus data we're going to get.
We get some PMIs on Friday and on Sunday, I believe, as well. From Caixin going into Monday and closing out the trading week Friday evening, we'll get that, the official read from PMIs. But the PMIs are important, particularly on the non-manufacturing side, because we've got comfortable with manufacturing being soft, believing that services would remain resilient. And that was the surprise for the US data in Friday's session. And since then, it's been rough.
In our special coverage yesterday, we really tried to get the Matthew crew in here. Damian Sassauer was great. We thank Luke Kawa for coming in. Cameron Christ joined us briefly. And on the street, we had some great conversations. And that's what you do with Julian Emanuel of BTIG. These are guys, folks, that aren't like a green arrow up, red arrow down like Gina Martin Adams. There's some prodigious math abilities as well. Julian Emanuel, within your derivatives math, do you see any catharsis out there, or is it just a corrective rollover?
No, well, to us, the thing that sort of is bothersome this morning is that everyone is using this phrase that's basically been out there in the public since 1987, turnaround Tuesday. The expectation is that you're going to bounce. And from our point of view, when you look at the action yesterday, it was a bit too orderly to expect, a sustainable bounce.
Is it a trend-based orderly, or is this stochastic, where it's anything at any moment?
Well, no, actually, it's been trend-based so far, because you really did not see intense dislocations. We're not saying that the larger-term trend has changed, mind you, but what we are saying is that this type of activity in this type of uncertainty is likely going to lead to lower prices in the near term.
Julian, there's a belief out there that the Federal Reserve will cut rates at least once, if not twice, if not three times by the beginning of next year. How much does that actually support equity prices?
Well, it's certainly part of the psychology right now, given what the market is trying to price in. But from our point of view, that could end up being a liability because, as you detailed just a few moments ago, there really is a very large dispersion of opinion. And if, in fact, it turns out that, the coronavirus effects sort of wash over and, the slowdown is temporary, what you have is the potential for just far too much stimulus at some point, and I'm not sure that the Fed is ready to go there.
Julian, let me just pick up on one thing. This word temporary, it's getting thrown around a hell of a lot, and to some extent, I think in economics, by definition, is somewhat temporary and transitory. Things change over time. It might just take a whole lot longer. What is the definition of temporary right now on Wall Street? 3 months, 2 quarters? What is it?
I would say it's actually right in between those two, John. There is an expectation that this is going to overhang, probably through the second quarter. And if you think about, what the medicine says, that, the virus is likely to dissipate as the weather gets warmer, the expectation, and we don't think it's necessarily a V, but we do think the expectation is that growth will stabilize in the second half.
Okay, so this is important. We go from a V-shaped recovery to a U. That means the narrative has already shifted. So, Julian, we now need to talk about how long that base of the U actually is. Are you saying it's somewhere in between a quarter, 2 quarters?
More than likely, because again, if you think about it, and this is related but unrelated, but related, is that you have a lot of political uncertainty in the U.S. There's an element of political uncertainty globally, but very fortuitously, the same stimulus that's not necessarily certainty in the U.S. is coursing through the Chinese system that, once you have a stabilization in the disease progression, is likely to be, very, very stimulative.
I want to go back to something that John was pointing out a little bit earlier about the dollar, that all of this points to a stronger dollar because the Fed can't cut rates that much at this point, and you have the potential resilience of the U.S. economy. How disruptive is that, is the strength of the greenback?
Well, certainly, over the last 3 or 4 years, whenever we've seen periods of volatility and down equity markets and uncertainty, they've been accompanied by a rising dollar. However, we'd actually say here that it may not be as quite a clear-cut case that the dollar is going to continue to rally. Because if you think about it, right, if you look at bond spreads, actually, despite the fact that we're basically at new lows in the U.S. in 10s and 30s, you haven't touched the lows of last summer yet in Europe and in Japan. And by that same token, what we'd say is the Fed actually has more ammunition to cut at the short end than do the rest of the world's central banks. So you could get interest rate compression there, and that is likely to be a headwind for the dollar.
Julian Emanuel with us here with BTIG. Julian, I think we've had such a bull market, and certainly a one-year bull market, that nobody talks about intermediate bear market and all this quaint stuff from another time and another volatility. Were you buying yesterday? I mean, just sort of genetically, if you go down 800 or 1,000 Dow points, does Julian Emanuel pull the buy tickets out of his left front pocket?
No, we basically, told our sales force that we should be preaching a little bit of patience here. You don't need to run in front of this. And frankly, when you think about the moves and the price gains in some of the highest flyers over the last year, 50, 100, 150% in some of these technology type names, it's very reasonable to expect, more than 2 or 3 days worth of profit.
This just came up, John. This is the power of the Bloomberg. I've got something called Kleinman moving averages, which is George Kleinman, a very famous set of 3 moving averages. Amazon perfectly kissed its long-term moving average yesterday, like Teach a Course kissed its moving average.
The
technicals came down perfectly and nailed the long-term moving average.
Let's get one more on the fundamentals. You mentioned the politics, Julian. I don't think anyone knows what to do with the politics right now. We struggle to get our hands around what is happening in China, South Korea, Iran, Italy with the virus, the supply shock, etc. What do you do with the politics at the moment?
Well, I think you basically build it into your, thinking about the markets as an extra level of uncertainty. And I think it makes perfect sense when you look at it that even though the equity markets were playing catch up in terms of price action to what the bond market and the commodity markets were already saying, those markets still, their volatility shot higher the last 4 or 5 days. And we just think that this is a period where you're going to see a lot bigger moves both up and down, and people just have to basically get used to that.
Julian, I remember when you and I were talking about cash a couple of years ago, and you were saying it's not time to hold cash, go into equities. Is now a time for cash?
Well, so the way we think about this is, over the course of this 11 years, there have been, numerous declines of 10 to 15%, all of which have been buying opportunities. And our advice along those lines is, if you don't see yourself as a buyer, if you see yourself thinking that you need to hedge or sell down 10 to 15%, then you need to hold a little bit more cash now.
God, I did the right thing yesterday. I went Forpal leveraged.
Forple.
Forple Lever Sell Cash Fund. Julian Emanuel, thank you for telling me I made the right decision yesterday. He is with BTIG. Futures highs for the day up 19. Dow futures up 151. With the news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, John, Lisa, thank you very much. President Trump held a news conference about a half an hour ago in India. President Trump says he's optimistic about the prospects of inking a trade deal with India. Trump commented on the final day of his two-day visit to the country. Trump was also asked about recent reports that Russia is trying to interfere in the 2020 election.
Basically, they would like to see Bernie is probably winning, and it looks like he's winning, and he's got a head of steam, and they maybe don't want him for obvious reasons. So they don't want him, so they put out a thing that Russia's backing him. This is what they do. I've gone through it for a long time. I get it. I get the game better than anybody.
Meanwhile, Sanders, who is the front runner, heads into tonight's debate in South Carolina with 6 other Democratic presidential candidates. Speaking at a CNN town hall event in Charleston last night, he dismissed the notion that he can't work with Republicans.
Last year, for the first time, managed to utilize the War Powers Act to get the United States, get our troops out of the horrific war in Yemen. We got that passed. I work with a very conservative Republican, Mike Lee of Utah. You know, Mike. So the idea, when I was mayor, I worked with Mayor of Burlington, Vermont, I worked with Republicans.
You can hear tonight's debate live on Bloomberg in New York, Boston, and Washington, D.C. Hosni Mubarak, who became Egypt's longest-serving ruler in more than 150 years before being forced from office by an uprising, has died. Mubarak was 91. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John, Tom, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thank you, sir. 8 p.m. for the debates tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern
I did not know
time.
that an hour earlier. That's
East
a good and
Coast.
beautiful thing
East
for
Coast,
us.
so we can watch the whole thing.
I watched the whole thing last time.
I did too, but I was very tired staying.
Yeah, I was about to say.
The next day, detail.
8 to 10, a little bit later this evening, 8 p.m. Eastern. That is when the South Carolina Democratic debate will commence.
And Margaret Brennan, of course, with CBS there. And, of course, we love that she's with us on Bloomberg Radio Sunday afternoons with Face the Nation.
Looking forward to that a little bit later. Equity futures, then they bounce back just a little bit, up 0.6% on the S&P 500, positive 18 points. In the bond market, Treasury yields not even a basis point higher. Your 10-year, 137. From New York City, this is Bloomberg Radio.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Influential.
EasyJet fly to a wide range of ski destinations from London. So whether you want to go all out on a classic Alps experience or fancy something a little more low-key, it's smoother than ever, and you'll be there, well, you'll be there before you know it. Book now at easyjet.com.
If you're going to have NHS dental treatment, don't assume you can claim it for free. Not all benefits entitle you to free treatment. And if you claim when you're not entitled, you could face a penalty charge of £100, plus the cost of your treatment. Thankfully, the NHS Eligibility Checker will help you find out if you can claim for free. Then next time you're at the dentist, you'll know exactly which box to tick. Search Check Before You Tick online today.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. It is 8:17 on Wall Street, and futures are higher. We go to the First Word breaking news desk for today's morning call. Here's Bill Maloney. Bill, good morning.
And good morning, Karen. That's right. U.S. futures are trying to stabilize after yesterday's plunge, with Dow futures up 124 points. S&P's gained 15, and NASDAQ futures climbed by 72. The U.S. 10-year yield at 1.37%. Gold is down 8, and Japan fell 3.3% overnight after reopening, while European markets are down, but off their lows. Back in the U.S. on the economic front at 10 o'clock, consumer confidence and Richmond Fed. After the bell last night, HP boosted its forecast for the year, also plans to buy back $15 billion in stock, and MasterCard sees lower revenue growth due to the coronavirus. Regarding earnings this morning, Home Depot EPS and comp sales beat estimates. And in deal news, Mondelez is buying Give and Go Bakery from Thomas H. Lee. Wrapping things up, Franklin Resources was raised to neutral at Goldman Sachs. Tesla cut to hold at Jefferies. NVIDIA cut to reduce at Nomura Instinet, and Palo Alto Networks cut at Deutsche Bank, as well as JP Morgan. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Karen?
All right, Bill, thank you. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk on your terminal, SQUAWK, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Thanks so much, Karen. Greatly appreciate it. Lisa Bromwich, John Farrow, and Tom Keith, thank you for being with us. Boston, New York, and Washington, good morning. Good morning. Charleston, South Carolina, debate there tonight. We'll have full coverage through the evening, and, of course, on Sirius XM Channel 119 across the nation. Good morning. Benjamin Laidler with us at Tower Hudson right now. Many of you know that he was with us 14 months ago and did better than good on calling equity market. He was with us a few weeks ago, and we're thrilled he could rejoin us today. Ben, you have a brilliant chart. I want you to dovetail this into where we are now after 1,000 points down yesterday of the great rotation of U.S. domestic and international flows. What does that chart tell you about your confidence in U.S. equities?
It tells me that maybe people aren't as bulled up on U.S. equities as, I think the consensual narrative is. I mean, you've had something like $400 billion of mutual fund outflows out of U.S. equities over the last couple of years. And at the same time, you've had an awful lot of money going into international equities. So I think this sort of narrative as we came into the year that, the U.S. just couldn't keep outperforming and that you should really look at international equities has actually sort of been turned on its head, right? I mean, the coronavirus was a sort of catalyst for this, but I think we've all woken up to the fact, or the consensus has woken up to the fact that this sort of international growth recovery is maybe not as secure as it once looked. The valuations I don't think were a bit of a mirage. It's just, you have different sector composition internationally. And I think the U.S. is actually a lot more secure than people think it is. I think the macro, we're in pretty good shape. Valuations, I think, are more supported than people think they are. Yeah. And we've just had the end of the earnings recession. And to back to the chart, I think the sentiment on U.S. equities actually hasn't been that good.
John,
to put all that together and, I think the case for the U.S. remains here.
This chart, John, is one of the great unknowns of the present zeitgeist. People don't understand the flows, domestic, international.
So, Ben, let's extend this one step further, or a couple of steps further. Do you think there's a technical flow dynamic, flow component to the resilience of equities over the last couple of weeks, and that wasn't just some complacency around fundamentals?
Yeah, I think there's been a little bit of that, right? I definitely think you've had inflows into U.S. equities for the last couple of weeks, which is the first time we've seen them in, literally months. So, it could be part of that sort of safe haven trade, but you're definitely seeing money coming back into U.S. equities for the first time in a while. And I think the other one is earnings, right? Let's talk about fundamentals. We had 3 quarters of negative earnings growth, and now in the fourth quarter, which is basically wrapping up, as we speak, you've got positive earnings, and I've argued before they're more positive than they look once you sort of strip out energy, and we all know all the bad things that are happening there, and once you strip out international, which has been quite a big drag on US. So domestic US, I would actually say it was in pretty good shape, and I think it gets better from here.
Well, Ben, let's talk about that, because Germany, recession likely, Italy could be one too, Japan is heading there, South Korea is going to be a terrible Q1 as well for China too. Can you really remain constructive with that kind of macro backdrop, Ben?
I think you can if if the coronavirus remains reasonably contained, right, and it remains a sort of 1 or 2 quarter event, and allows us to sort of look through it, if you like, to sort of the recovery, and we sort of continue on. So I think that's absolutely what's at stake here, right? I mean, what drove the sell-off at the end of last week and into this week was partly the coronavirus sort of going global and the fear of the unknown, and that it could dislocate economies for more than a quarter. But, I also think there's some politics here, right? I mean, Sanders' resounding victory in the Nevada caucus, I think, is certainly unnerving some people. And we had flash PMIs out of the U.S. at the end of last week, which showed a little bit of weakness in services, which I think is important because, that's been the anchor of this sort of U.S. economic strength for the last sort of couple of years. So, and also, the backdrop's really important here.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty bullish on U.S. equities, but we are on 19 times earnings, and we have just come off months and months of below average equity volatility. So I think, to have markets pulling back a little bit and to have a bit of volatility, I think we've just got to expect it from time to time.
Ben, I'm really glad that Tom started with flows and talked about how flows are flooding into the United States since it is sort of the strongest economy of them all. I'm struggling to understand where they're coming out of, and I'm looking at emerging markets lower. If you look at the MSCI index by 5% year to date, a pain trade since a lot of people thought that this area would outperform. Do you think that consensus trade at the beginning of 2020 has been turned on its head and is poised to continue to underperform through the rest of the year?
Yeah, I think we're in the middle of it being turned on its head. I mean, I think it's really reasonably early days. We've seen a couple of weeks of US inflows, but I think there's, as I say, on a cumulative basis, over the last 2 years, you've had something like $300 billion go into international equities. So, I think there's quite a long way to come, and I think the mistake that the markets are making is, the international was really going to recover here. I mean, I think that was a little bit of a sort of head fake, right? I mean, Europe is going to have significantly lower growth than the US this year. China's stabilizing at best. I think the resiliency of that international growth was sort of always in question, and then the sort of mirage that valuations are cheap. I don't think they really are. I just think it's, places like Europe are full of cheaper sectors, and the US is full of sort of intrinsically more profitable, more expensive sectors.
Ben Laidler, thank you so much. Tara Hudson, greatly appreciated to see you in February this year. Futures up 12, Dow futures up 110. John, I do have to mention, and this goes to idiosyncratic realities such as Russia and Turkey. Turkish lira is having just a grim 3-4 trading sessions as well, elevated out to substantially new Turkish lira weakness.
Well, what Ben's talking about is spot on. There'll be a lot of people challenging much of what he said, but one specific component of it, the international story, getting long international, rest of the world over the United States, that trade has been blown up
Q4 story.
over the last month, but just blown up over the last month completely.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, the prices adjust, and let me do a data check here. Prices adjust better off what we saw yesterday. Futures up 13, Dow futures up 120, 2 points on the VIX, 23.20, way away from that 26 level that we saw earlier. Stay with us. We'll do more data checks today, more conversation on these historic equity markets. This is Bloomberg.
He got hair down to his knees. has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients, and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Vattel Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will this look like? How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
We can't always tell, but 1 in 5 people in the UK are disabled. So when we're all heads down, stampeding and charging because we're late for the bus or train, we could be doing more harm than we think. So let's not forget about the people we share our journeys with. Let's slow down a bit. Remember, it's everyone's journey.
Do you do the same thing every weekend? You know, meet up with the same friends for brunch, browse around the same shops, eat the same Saturday night takeaway. Mine's a lamb balti with mushroom pilau rice. Snuggle up next to the same person and watch the same brain-numbing reality TV. Then maybe it's time to switch it up. Starting with the all-new Vox. It's bold styling and up to 70 miles per gallon. To switch it up, visit your local Vauxhall dealership or search New Corsa. Official WLTP test figures for comparison purposes only. Real-world figures may vary.
The moment you realise that radiator isn't warming up, it's chilly in London and half the class are coming for a sleepover. The moment you realise you're covered by British Gas Home Care from £14 a month. That's just 46p a day, including part labour. Buy selected home care cover online by the 10th of March and get 1 month free. British Gas, here to solve. Search British Gas Home Care. Conditions apply. Prices vary by postcode.
Full English is all round today, please, Kat. I'll get this, lads.
Seems the gaffer's unusually generous today. Not because the Reds won last night, but probably because he managed to get 10% off a set of Michelin Cross Climate tyres, plus a free safety kit at QuickFit.
Can I get some extra bacon, boss?
Steady on, Danny boy. You'll be making all the teas today. Get 10% off 2 or more Michelin Cross Climate tyres. Book at quickfit.com or visit your local QuickFit and drive away happy. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg Radio. Your equity market this morning, very different to your equity market yesterday morning. Futures positive, 1/3%, up 11 points on the S&P 500 after the biggest one-day loss on the benchmark in the United States since February 2018. In the bond market, no big bounce back in the bond market whatsoever for 10-year yields, down hard yesterday, up by not even a basis point today, up to 136. And the 10-year, Tom, we are down by 0.5 basis points. Yeah. No move whatsoever after the monster move we had yesterday.
I got to admit, bonds are talking, and that will go into Clarida's discussion, the vice chairman's discussion at 3 p.m. Today. But, you know, it is a better tape. It's a stasis tape. But at the same time, in no way can I call technical reversal across any of these four asset classes.
Bonds are speaking, and we've been talking about treasuries and gilts and a whole host of other government debt, but we haven't talked about pandemic bonds. And I will say the World Health Organization is saying the coronavirus isn't yet a global pandemic, but the bonds that protect against a pandemic are trading at 40% below their face value, basically implying that it will spread and become a pandemic. Just throwing that out there.
Perception is everything.
Yeah.
And market perception matters.
I want to be clear here on pandemic, because a word I've seen in the media has been really misused in the last 24 hours. It has not been any statement of official pandemic, although the World Health Organization has talked about preparedness.
But they have not labeled it as such.
They've not labeled
Correct.
it a pandemic. And there's a real raging debate in medicine about that, because Korea, I mean, you look unilaterally at Korea, that's a pandemic by definition, but no one's saying that because you need a global feeling, and you don't have a global South Korea right now.
As I've said multiple times, we shouldn't try and be medical experts, but for the markets right now, what they see is this spreading to South Korea, spreading to the Middle East, spreading to Europe as well, contained for a moment maybe, and it was that confidence in the ability of the Chinese policymaker to contain the virus that initially gave markets some confidence too. That market confidence has diminished somewhat, by a greater extent too, over the last couple of weeks.
In particular in Iran and in other regions where there perhaps is a bit less clarity, transparency, and so people have even less knowledge about how quickly it might be spreading.
Quickly, Anthony from Sparta emails in. He's seeing Stars Bruins up in Boston here in the next 48 hours. Yeah, on Thursday night. He's going to be at the Garden, Stars Bruins.
Are you going to be there too?
No, I'm not. But Anthony, thank you for emailing in on your trip to Boston.
Did you see that guy that drives the thing that flattens the ice out?
We call that a Zamboni.
A Zamboni.
Are you kidding me?
A Zamboni.
The thing that flattens the ice out.
Well, just for our audience outside of the north of America, does anyone know what a Zamboni is? I didn't know what a Zamboni was.
In the old days, oh wise one, when I saw Alan Arbor and Donald Cherry playing defense, this is for the nefarious Amerks of Rochester, there were no Zambonis.
What did they do?
They had a pole cart thing with water in it with like a big long towel behind it, and they hand pulled the carts around the rink.
John, I want to let you know that Tom's dream is to drive a Zamboni.
Oh, you want to drive a Zamboni?
I've never driven one.
We need to make that happen.
Norman Reed was giving me lessons once years ago. We said good morning to Norman Reed up in Boston.
So you can be the goalkeeper one day. That was a really cool story.
It's very cool.
Really cool story.
I teared up. I was like emotional. Luke Cowell was like,
you tear up a lot, though. You're an emotional guy.
I'm an emotional guy.
Should we bring it in Shepperton?
Let's bring He's emotional. He has to root for Newcastle. You got to be emotional.
The Pantheon Macroeconomics Chief Economist. Ian, fantastic to have you with us. Mr. Clarida, the Vice Chair, speaking at 3 p.m. Eastern. What are you looking for from him later?
I'm expecting to say that the Fed is watching very carefully the developments on the coronavirus. That seems to be the mantra of the moment. I'm glad they're watching very carefully. I don't think they're going to do anything yet, but I tell you, if we have a few more days like yesterday, I think they probably would. As of right now, we seem to have a sort of a dead cat bounce emerging in futures this morning in the US. So we'll see what develops. But I think that the Fed is not at the point yet where they're going to pull the trigger to take sort of a precautionary action. But Yeah, it could happen. I mean, I think the thing we all got to admit here is how much we don't know. I mean, we just don't know how far this thing's going to spread, how quickly it's going to spread, where it's going to spread to, the extent of the disruption it's going to cause. It's just a long list of don't knows. So I think for the Fed to be saying they're watching very carefully is probably about the most sensible thing at the moment, and then we will see the outcome over the next few days.
I agree with you. I've said multiple times over the last couple of weeks that we just need a massive dose of humility about what we don't know at the moment. We can get our hands around some of the risks, though. Twin shocks to demand and supply for the global economy. Yeah. I asked this question a little bit earlier, Ian. I'd be interested in your response too. What is the biggest shock that you're worried about at the moment, the demand side or supply side?
Well, the two are inextricably linked. I mean, certainly if I were in manufacturing, I'd be most concerned about the disruptions to supply, inability to get a hold of parts, materials, equipment, all of those things. If I were in a consumer-facing business, I'd be worrying about people just staying home and not shopping at my store, or not coming to my restaurant or my bar, or not taking vacations in my hotel. So it depends where you sit. But the effect ultimately could be quite severe. We've seen this in Italy right now with 50,000 people in lockdown. I imagine that the tourist business in Tenerife and the Canary Islands is now feeling extremely nervous after their one case. Actually, that was a doctor visiting from Italy, which presumably is why he brought it with him. So it does depend which bit of the economy you sit in as to whether you're more concerned about demand and supply. From a sort of a macro perspective, I think the Fed's focus will be on the potential for a demand shock, because I think the extent of inflation, upside inflation risk coming from this is probably quite small. Remember that in the West anyway, most of our inflation index components are services. They're not goods. So if the price of manufactured stuff from China goes up, even if it goes up quite a lot, it's probably not going to make a huge difference to the inflation picture. I think the Fed would look through that, and if it turned out that demand were collapsing, I think they would step in and ease pretty much no matter what was happening to the inflation side from China.
Ian, there's a bit of gallows humor about the Fed cutting rates in response to the coronavirus, the concept that could somehow help the situation when it is so clearly a solution that isn't addressing a medical need. I'm just wondering, for stocks, I mean, how much will it actually do to cut rates if the Fed is waiting for actual evidence that there is an economic slowdown? By the time they do that, wouldn't there be enough of a pull downward for equities that a 25, 50 basis point rate cut won't make a difference?
Yes, I mean, this is the dilemma that they face. Do you respond to a market move? Do you wait for the economic data to move? Do you assume that a market move will drive a move in the economic data? I mean, there's quite a lot of evidence that it would. And then ultimately, if you do pull the trigger, what good does it do? I mean, it sends a signal, of course. The signal that it sends is that the Fed has got the markets back, which is a view that's been extremely powerfully held in markets for a very long time now. And so it's kind of, you need to think of the alternative. If they don't step in and move, then that could then generate panic in markets, because it will be saying to investors for the first time in a very long time that, hey, the Fed doesn't have your back, in which case sell everything. And that's not a position I think they want to get into. So having trained markets to believe that the Fed will always be there for them, now probably is not the time not to be there for them. So I kind of think that if the markets take a further serious tumble, they'll pretty much have to move. But you're right. I mean, it doesn't address the underlying question. Cutting rates doesn't fix the coronavirus, that's for sure.
Ian Shepherdson, you and Freya Beamish have been lights out on LinkedIn. You've just really put out some very important Asia research as well. Give us your update, what your expert on China says. What does Freya Beamish say about the immediate dynamics of China?
Yeah, it's an awful mess, and the more we look at it, the more bearish we're getting about the first quarter, and the more nervous we're getting about the prospect for a quick rebound in the second quarter. After all, the start of the second quarter now is only 4 weeks away. So this is now becoming a clear and present danger to China's economy for the whole of the first half of the year. And I think it's becoming more and more difficult to have a view in a V-shaped rebound. There's a lot of activity there that will be recaptured, but an awful lot of it that won't, especially in the services sector. And they must be worrying about permanent loss of business from firms outside China who will try and now do business with alternative suppliers in other countries. I'm pretty sure that China isn't going to print GDP numbers anything like as bad as we think they will actually be. But of course, disbelief in China's statistics isn't anything new. But I'm pretty convinced that the economy is going to contract outright in the first quarter, and at the moment it's very much an open question as to how big the rebound is in the second quarter, or heaven forbid, whether that rebound gets pushed out into the third, which is possible at this point.
Ian, I was looking at some of the estimates for PMIs just last week ahead of this China PMI extravaganza this coming weekend. 45.1 for manufacturing is the estimate. It's a moving target as we survey participants that can move around ahead of the print. Non-manufacturing, 51.5. That's the median estimate going into the February print for non-manufacturing PMI. Ian, how on earth do you generate any kind of estimate whatsoever as to what has happened in the Chinese economy this month?
You don't. I mean, these numbers are guesswork. Nothing more and nothing less at this point. The previous print for the manufacturing was 50 dead, and it tends not to move by huge amounts. So for it to drop to 45, or the consensus in your survey, 45.1. Don't forget the 0.1. To drop by 5 points is an enormous move, and to drop by 3.5 points, which is the consensus for the non-manufacturing PMI, also is an enormous move, and that will be reflected pretty quickly in PMIs in Europe and the US as well, if it happens. But, we just don't know. We really don't know. We do just have to, at this point, hold our hands up and say that when these numbers print, we could be surprised in either direction. Absolutely.
I just want to say, folks, go to LinkedIn, Pantheon Macroeconomics. It is lights out, one of the best things on LinkedIn out there. And Johnny even recapitulates my viral log chart from the Johns Hopkins University.
Yeah, shout out to Klaus Verstessen as well.
Yeah.
Does the European coverage for them.
Yeah.
Fantastic firm.
I mean, it's like
some great
best
research.
of class out on, it's hugely informative stuff.
A viral log chart.
Thank you.
It's about the virus. It's not a log chart that's gone viral.
It's about the cases of China and the deaths, and the slope is flattening out of cases. That's good news.
Although you have to wonder about the actual accuracy of the data as well as the spread to other regions.
Ian, great to catch up with you.
Thank you, Ian.
Ian Shepherdson of Pantheon Macroeconomics. I hope the Newcastle situation gets a little bit better for you, sir. Should we get you some news, some headlines worldwide? Let's cross over to Michael Barr. Hello, Michael.
Hello, John, Lisa, Tom. The president held a news conference in India as he gets ready to wrap up his 2-day trip there. President Trump says while he's optimistic about the prospects of making a trade deal, he doesn't think India is treating the U.S. fairly when it comes to trade.
I want reciprocal. It has to be reciprocal. And the money you're talking about is major, but the United States has to be treated fairly. And India understands that. The relationship is outstanding, but India understands that.
Trump met today in New Delhi with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The White House is preparing to request billions of dollars in emergency funds to respond to the coronavirus outbreak. The White House wants $2.5 billion. However, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called the proposal long overdue and completely inadequate. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, Pelosi took a walking tour of Chinatown because she says it is safe for tourists and residents.
This fear is, I think, unwarranted in light of the precautions that are being taken here in the United States. I can't speak for any other country.
Officials from the CDC, HHS, State Department, and Homeland Security are heading to Capitol Hill later today to brief a bipartisan group of lawmakers. German police say 35 people, including 18 children, remain in the hospital after a man drove his car into a crowd celebrating Carnival. Police said today that 17 others have been treated and released. Authorities continue to look for a motive behind Monday's incident. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John, Tom, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thank you, sir. That was your news. Here's your guide through the rest of Tuesday. 3 p.m. Eastern, we will have a speech from the Fed Vice Chair, Richard Clouder. He is speaking down in Washington, D.C. Look out for that. Then 8 p.m. this evening, 8 p.m. Eastern time, the Democratic debates in Charleston, South Carolina, Tom.
Of 7. There will be 7 candidates there. And, of course, you really wonder how much they're going to play to Super Tuesday. Because I'll tell you, Senator Sanders in Las Vegas really pushed the Texas theme.
And will anyone drop out after South Carolina ahead of Super Tuesday? Looking at the equity market this morning, good morning to you all. We advanced 0.4%, a very mild bounce back after yesterday's monster move lower. This is Bloomberg.
This
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini. The coronavirus has China's property sector under pressure, even with the prospect of more stimulus.
Well, look, this is a very serious situation for a lot of China's developers.
Katrina Nichols is reporter for Bloomberg News.
Many have a cash buffer of only about 3 months, and they use that money that they get in the door from pre-sales or sales of apartments to finance some pretty heavy debt loads.
And this has developers trotting out the bargains.
Evergrande, which is one of China's biggest developers, they're offering discounts of up to 25% on apartments and down payments of as little as $700. Another company there called Fantasia, it's offering buy 2 apartments, get 1 free, and then buyers can cancel or rescind the contract within 30 days and get their deposit, plus interest back.
News reports say real estate developers in China are facing debt repayments of nearly $5 billion next month. And that's your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the
EasyJet fly to a wide range of ski destinations from London. So whether you want to go all out on a classic Alps experience or fancy something a little more low-key, it's smoother than ever, and you'll be there, well, you'll be there before you know it. Book now at easyjet.com.
Switch to 5G on Vodafone. Pre-order the new Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra 5G by March 8th and get wireless Galaxy Buds Plus for free. With unlimited 5G data, you can post 108 megapixel photos and download videos impossibly fast. All on the UK's best mobile data network. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
5G subject to coverage in your area. MPerf test awarded Vodafone Best 2019 Mobile Internet Performance. Minimum term applies. See vodafone.co.uk.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
S&P futures up 15 points. Dow futures up 133. NASDAQ futures up 69. The DAX in Germany's down 1/3%. 10-year Treasury up 2/30 seconds. Yield 1.36%. Yield on the 2-year 1.23%, and the 30-year yield 1.83%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.1% or 5 cents at $51.38 a barrel. COMEX gold down 1.4%, down $23 to $16.5370 an ounce. The euro 1.0844 against the dollar. British pound 1.2977. And the yen is at 110.55. BTIG strategist Julian Emmanuel says yesterday's stock sell-off was too orderly to expect a sustainable bounce.
This type of activity in this type of uncertainty is likely going to lead to lower prices in the near term.
And that's BTIG strategist Julian Emmanuel. Shake Shack's down 14% this morning after the company posted worse than expected comparable sales and disappointing 2020 targets as growth in delivery slowed amid a shift to a sole partnership with Grubhub. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Lisa.
Karen, thanks so much for the world-class data check. Nobody, folks, does it like Ms. Moscow. She just kills it with the detail, the acuity of each and every item on my Bloomberg Launchpad. She does that.
She's been tremendous.
Some people in their sleep count sheep and she counts Turkish lira, depreciating into the distance.
How far does she get?
6.15 on Turkish lira. It's been 3 ugly days. They've got serious military issues with Russia on their border right now. Somebody said earlier it was a dead cat bounce. We don't say that. We don't editorialize. But Lisa, the word I would use is stasis here. The tape. Somebody upstairs in the food court said to me, what's it look like? It feels just like stasis here, waiting for the next news.
The unknowable is kind of paralyzing people, but the one thing that is knowable is what will earnings do, and it is not going to be positive for them, and we're starting to get earnings revisions that are lower.
And the avocado toast this morning was just exquisite in the food court.
You have never had avocado toast. Have you ever had avocado toast? Ever?
When I'm on the Upper West Side, I'm forced to have avocado toast.
I know that's not true. I've seen you there, and I know that you're not eating avocado toast.
Why don't you bring in our esteemed guest, who's all stasis right now?
Gina Martin Adams, Chief U.S. Equity Strategist for us here at Bloomberg Intelligence. Brilliant research coming out. And I really want to, focus on the earnings. You put one report out, stocks and face near-term struggle as earnings momentum runs out. What were you referring to?
Yeah, so a lot of it is just fourth quarter earnings season, I do think, elevated stocks to a degree where they could sort of ignore the downward revision momentum to Q1 and Q2 related to coronavirus. Because Q4 came out so much better than expected, in the end, we ended up earning about 2% growth on the index. EPS, that's much better than the expectation for nearly a 2% decline. So that helped us ignore coronavirus. Well, now that earnings is waning, the momentum in forward estimates is becoming more and more important. And what we're finding is not only are first quarter estimates falling, but second quarter estimates are falling, and third quarter estimates are even starting to fall now. So analysts are sort of having to embed expectations for much slower growth, disruptions to supply chains, a lot of uncertainty into their forecasts. And I think that's going to weigh on markets for the near term.
And we had MasterCard, United Air, both emerging as the latest companies to warn that sales and profit are put at risk as a result of the disruptions due to the coronavirus. Just a mounting number of companies saying this. Do you think that this is going to be V-shaped, U-shaped, or do you think that this is going to be a more permanent hit for companies at a time of already slowing momentum?
It really depends upon how long coronavirus lasts, right? The first quarter is typically very seasonally weak for most industries anyway, especially technology. And technology is really central to the story because TMT as a whole is 35% of the market cap of the index now. So it's really important that the tech supply chain is able to operate and get back online by the end of the first quarter, because you start to see order flow ramp in the second quarter and into the third quarter especially. Third quarter is the most important season for tech. So I think you want to watch for how long it lasts. It can absolutely be a V if the factories come back online and demand starts recovering, if all of the quarantines end within the next week or so. You can definitely have a V-shaped recovery into the second half. But if it persists over a period of the next several weeks and even leaks especially into the second quarter, that I think could be consequential and create more of a downdraft that stays really flat and then an upward trajectory, which is much more like a U type of shape.
It's all speculation. But then if I own something now, if I've been a grown-up and I bought the Gina Martin Adams ETF, whatever it is, I'm rationalizing out not quarters, but I'm rationalizing out 1 year or 2 year or 3 year. With a new low interest rate environment, how far out do you in Bloomberg Intelligence rationalize? I mean, to me, 3 years is the new 1 year.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, especially with the Fed sort of constantly keeping rates as low as possible, real rates in very, very negative territory,
where's that
constantly stepping
in our heads?
I think there's so much uncertainty with the end of this year with respect to the election and sort of where that takes us into 2021. It's almost impossible to take a 3-year view. And this is part of the consequence of markets, unfortunately, is we've got coronavirus, and then once we move past coronavirus, we think again about election. Then once we move past election, depending upon who's elected, we think about potentially a new energy deal, a huge fiscal spending package, or trade wars again. So I think that the market is ongoing and adjusting to this ongoing period of a tremendous policy input in general, and that's creating a much shorter time horizon. There are fewer and fewer adults in the room, is my short answer to the long question. Nobody thinks 3 years out. They think Okay, 6 months out, 12 months out, but thinking 3 years out has become nearly impossible because of all of this policy volatility on the fiscal side more than on the monetary side.
So, Gina, you laid out all the uncertainties, and certainly that is the prevailing sentiment across markets today. What's your highest conviction certainty that's sort of anchoring your belief in U.S. equities right now?
Yeah. A lot of it is just the flight to quality certainty. When I talk about that policy uncertainty as the underlying condition that investors have to face, I think it's one of the single biggest underappreciated drivers of the U.S. equity premium over the course of the last decade has been, in times of uncertainty, investors flock to the most certain. And the U.S. is the most certain in the globe of equities, right? It's the most consistent. The companies are most consistent. They also are the biggest market share gainers. They produce the strongest earnings growth via margin expansion. And that consistency is very, very valued. It's one of the reasons I think the dollar continues to rally as well. It's a safe haven. Right. And safe havens perform best in times of uncertainty. So the U.S., a lot of the reason the U.S. performs as well as it does is because it is the certainty in an uncertain world.
Gina Martin Adams, thank you so much. And to all your team as well. Particularly Drew Redding was great today on Home Depot.
Thanks.
You know, he was we had him on too quickly here on Home Depot doing better than good. I want to make clear, looking at SPX 500 futures, that we are in no way through the resistance form since about 12 noon yesterday. Let me give you that exact time. I checked that about 4 a.m. yesterday. We are no way through that resistance on SPX, but we're doing better. The tape up 18. Dow futures up 145. Stay with us. More data checks from Karen Moscow. This is Bloomberg.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
A change is coming. Millions of people across the UK are realising that if their broadband's out of contract, they could be out of pocket. So it's time to switch and save with Vodafone Superfast Broadband for £21.95 a month. Join the Great British Broadband switch today. The future's exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
18-month contract subject to credit check. Publicly available out of contract, non-promotional pricing. Superfast 1, 73% of customers receive sync speeds above 35 megabits per second. See vodafone.co.uk/broadband.
Despite never having used them, Alison Peartree was not initially a fan of purple bricks.
Because I heard from my uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker they don't have proper estate agents.
But Alison's uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker was wrong. Purple Bricks have experienced local agents ready to sell your home.
Turns out Martin from Purple Bricks was very knowledgeable. And he didn't charge commission. I've even recommended him to my sister's boyfriend's auntie's hairdresser, Sharon.
Purple Bricks. Book your free evaluation today.
Fixed fee payable on instruction or after 10 months. Viewing service cost extra.
They don't chant your name when you give blood or sing songs about you. But patients and their families will remember you forever. Because your blood can change their lives. We need more blood donors in Tooting, the West End and Edgware. Bleed for London. Join us today at blood.co.uk.
Good morning, this is your Southern service to London Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What C sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway, we're with you.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and tune in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn. The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
We have to get it right the first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
American economic power and future depends on trade deals.
In many of these countries, we're still seeing people struggling.
Finance.
We're in this vortex of uncertainty. These big companies, they just sometimes lack focus.
Investment.
The markets have become a little bit too addicted to the Fed.
Timing the market is just so difficult.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene. Bloomberg Surveillance. Market goes down 1,000 points, Paul. What do? Well, you hit yourself over the head with a 2x4. That'll do it. Right. Hopefully it's a 2x4 from Home Depot. I mean, Home Depot to the rescue. Not that it was, there's been serious virus issues and headlines out of Italy today. And, we were really ugly about 5 a.m. We've gotten better. Futures up 15. Dow futures up 124. But it's great to see Mr. Langone's orange shop come to the rescue.
It really is. We've got a strong housing market, Tom. Strong consumer, strong housing market. That typically bodes well for Home Depot, although they've had some disappointing quarters recently. But this was a good one.
And a good one. We'll get to that in a moment with David Wilson. But, we've clearly been a theme this morning, folks, of all the good conversations we've had. We'll give you more data checks within the hour as well. I'm looking at yen. 110.60 is a weaker Japanese yen. That's away from the angst that you would see. So a little calmer market there. But in the good conversations, it's really international struggles given all that's out there. And there's that quality in America seems to be one of the themes is people with all their different opinions try to extricate themselves from down 5.3% in the overall market.
Exactly right. And so the question, that erased the gains for the year.
Gone.
And the issue is now, kind of where do we go from here? And I think that people are trying to get a sense as it relates to the virus, how quickly it will spread, how broadly it will spread. And that seems to be the key focus right now.
Let's look at individual stocks. That's where we go from here. And we do that with Mr. David Wilson. David, you start with Home Depot.
Indeed. And the shares are up 3% in early trading. Fiscal fourth quarter sales at the home improvement retailer beat analyst average estimate in the consensus metrics survey for stores open more than a year. Home Depot's earnings also top projections. The coronavirus, though, hasn't gone away. You see it pop up at MasterCard as an issue, and that stock's down 1.5%. The payment network cut a 3-week-old forecast for quarterly revenue because of the effects of the virus. And MasterCard also said CEO AJ Banga will step down at the beginning of next year. Chief Product Officer Michael Miebach will replace him. And most active stock in early trading, Mallinckrodt, up 37%. Yeah. The drug maker agreed to pay $1.6 billion to settle claims arising from the U.S. opioid crisis. The accord calls for Mallinckrodt's U.S. generics unit to go into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And so you're seeing gains in other defendants in opioid cases. Endo International up 15.5%, Teva Pharmaceutical up 5%, and Perrigo's up 8.5%. The generic drug maker won U.S. approval of the lung disease treatment ProAir. You've got HP up 3.5%. The computer and printer maker proposed $16 billion of payments to shareholders over 3 years, mainly through stock buybacks. They're tripling their repurchase program. HP also said it would step up cost cuts. All this designed to fend off a takeover offer from Xerox Holdings. And HP also raised this year's earnings per share forecast to reflect the coming buybacks. Xerox, by the way, also up 3.5% in early trading. Intuit's up 2.5%. The maker of tax and accounting software agreed to buy personal finance website Credit Karma, which offers free credit scores. The cash and stock deal is valued at about $7.1 billion.
I just want to interrupt first and say yields have worked lower here, even though futures up 13, David. We've got the 2-year yield down to new lows, 1.2351 on the 2-year yield. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. Quick look at earnings. Palo Alto Networks down 15%. The equipment maker's revenue for the fiscal second quarter was lower than estimates. Palo Alto gave a third quarter sales forecast to trail projections and lowered its full year revenue forecast. Macy's, we've seen swing between gains and losses. It's up about 1% at the moment. Fiscal fourth quarter sales at the department store chain came in all right. And earnings beat the highest analyst estimate. They're maintaining their full year forecast for now, though the virus may certainly hurt them down the line. You've got Dillard's down 4.5%. Fourth quarter earnings and sales at the department store chain trail projections. Shake Shack down 13.5%. The restaurant chain's fourth quarter sales missed estimates. Yeah, growth in delivery slowed as Shake Shack moved to an exclusive deal with Grubhub.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's becoming a seamless favorite, Grubhub favorite.
Do you get the Shake Shack delivered to the surveillance department?
We don't.
No.
I mean, Afterthought does. We should,
I
don't even have a conversation on this.
Yeah. Can I leave you with another coronavirus-related stock? It's Moderna. Up 15.5%. The drug maker, right, 15.5.
Got it.
The drug maker released the first batch of vaccine against the coronavirus to the National Institutes of Health, which will conduct an initial study.
David Wilson, thank you so much. In case Schiller, just want to point out pretty much on survey there as well, but we do see 2-year breakdown at 10 years, versus the angst, Paul Sweeney, of 2-3 hours ago. It's maybe not quite where it was. This is a joy. This is like Paul. We could go to South Carolina and bar ourselves with Cirilli. I mean, we had to get him out of jail in Las Vegas. He lost so much. Kevin Ocean was out in Las Vegas getting it done. It's a perfect moment to speak to Nancy Agnanovich about the angst tonight is the House of Representatives watches this debate.
Nancy Agnanovich, she's a Bloomberg Government Congressional Leadership reporter joining us. Nancy, thanks so much for joining us. Kind of what's the feeling? Let's just start off, just get a sense of what's the feeling as you spend your time on Capitol Hill talking to Congress folks. Kind of what are they thinking about as it relates to the debate tonight and how the democratic process is playing out?
Well, they try to put a brave face on some of this. For example, yesterday we asked Senator Durbin what he thought about Bernie Sanders and how he was doing, and he said he thought that he could win the election. But other, Democrats are sounding pretty worried. Yeah. And tomorrow they're going to Baltimore for a retreat where they're going to hear from pollsters and advisors and go state by state and look at these Senate races too, because so much of what's happening could affect their prospects in the Senate.
Okay, but Nancy, turn on your inner Michael Barone and let's get through it with a wonderful almanac that Mr. Barone and his compatriots put out. It's like 1,500 pages, folks. I religiously read it before any interview in the Agnanovich world. Nancy, they have to be petrified. They're going to give the House back to the Republicans. How much is that the day-to-day zeitgeist in your world?
We haven't heard a lot about it until recently when Congressman Clyburn, part of the leadership team, said that that's a real possibility. And you're talking about dozens and dozens of seats that could be lost. So it's very worrisome. And we're going to hear a lot more about that when the House comes back tonight. And a lot more focus on that. And they have to think about what they want to be promoting, what they can promote themselves in the House and campaign on, and try to get the attention, back to their agenda.
So, Nancy, now that the impeachment is behind Congress, at least for now, what are some of the key issues that Congress would like to get done and potentially could get done the remainder of this year?
Okay, infrastructure. We've heard that forever, correct? Now Pelosi, Yes, that's right, because everybody wants a project in their state or their district. And so, if only for campaign purposes, and I'm not saying that that's the case, but Pelosi has gotten her chairman on the same page, and they hope to roll out something that just doesn't deal with transportation infrastructure, but with broadband infrastructure, school projects, and so on, but they still don't know how to pay for it, and it's the same thing in the Senate. They have a much less ambitious plan dealing with, existing programs, but they don't yet know how to pay for it. But that's one thing we might see moving. And then another thing you hear a lot about on both sides is something dealing with drug prices and surprise billings, and that's something more to look for in the later spring. But there isn't much time before they all head for the campaign trail.
Nancy, let's talk about the Sweeney Project then while we're on infrastructure. I'm not talking, folks, about the third tunnel of aggression, which is between North Korea and South Korea. Nancy, I'm talking about something that makes a big dig in Boston look like, a Tinker Toys project. And that's the Gateway program of the Northeast Corridor to free up, Paul Sweeney's life. Paul, this is like a third tunnel, right?
This is
under the Hudson River.
And they have to rebuild the existing tunnels. They're 100 years old, and they're going to come crashing down on some
the Lincoln Tunnel.
This is not just New Jersey Transit. It's Amtrak. It's a whole Northeast Corridor.
I mean, Nancy, is this just simply that a Republican president doesn't want Senator Schumer to have a photo op?
I think it's bigger than Trump v. Schumer. I don't know why Trump, a New Yorker, who knows about the state of the infrastructure, the Northeast Corridor, and so on, would be opposed to it. But there are many other, lawmakers in the New York, New Jersey area who really, really want that project. But it's like a quid pro quo. Maybe it's caught up in border wall politics. Now, if you give me mine, I'll give you yours. It's hard to say. We haven't heard that much just recently about the Gateway, but we will hear a lot more about it.
Nancy, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. Nancy Agnotovich, she'll be hanging on the debate tonight. We really look forward to that. Kevin Cerulli and, of course, David Weston really focused on that coverage tonight. I'm in the camp. I could well be wrong. What do I know? I'm just punditry, but it'll be as fiery in a different way than what we saw in Las Vegas.
I think so, and kind of from what I'm reading, what I'm hearing from the folks that follow this closely is that Bernie Sanders obviously will be the focus of some of the other folks on the stage.
And Greg Valliere led his note this morning off of the Sanders-Castro-Ortega ancient history, which you got to believe is number one for some of these people as well. Futures up 12. The two-year yield I'm watching carefully. It's come in right now with the news. In New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Paul, thank you very much. Iran reported a total of 15 deaths from the outbreak, the most fatalities outside China, and a top health official tested positive for coronavirus. Italy reported a surge in infections, and Spanish police isolated 1,000 people at an island resort. President Donald Trump says Beijing was getting it under control more and more. Xi Jinping said China was confident of limiting the impact. Trump says that he spoke with Xi about the virus.
He is so committed to solving that problem. He is working very hard. He is very capable. The country is very capable. And it snuck up on him, but I think he's going to do well.
Trump also lashed out at Supreme Court justices and his Democratic rivals during a news conference in India today. He repeated his call for two liberal-leaning Supreme Court justices, including Justice Sonia Sotomayor, to recuse themselves from cases involving him or his administration.
Her statement was so inappropriate when you're a justice of the Supreme Court, and it's almost what she's trying to do is take the people that do feel a different way and get them to vote the way that she would like them to vote. I just thought it was so inappropriate.
Tonight, the Democratic presidential candidates will take the stage in South Carolina ahead of Saturday's primary in that state. Bloomberg carried tonight's debate live starting at 8 p.m. Wall Street time in New York, Boston, and Washington. Revelers dressed in costumes and reaching for beads thrown from floats take to the streets in the New Orleans area when Carnival season reaches its peak for Fat Tuesday, or as we call it in Detroit, Punchki Day. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts, more than 20 countries. I'm Mike LeBar. This is Bloomberg. Tom Paul.
Michael, what do we call it in Detroit?
It's Punchki Day.
Why?
It is a jelly donut on steroids. And you buy this, especially in Hamtramck, and that's what you eat on Fat Tuesday.
That's what you eat on Fat. I learned something new again, Tom. I mean, every day with Michael Barr. All right, very good. We got futures here.
Font of wisdom.
Font of wisdom. I mean, Punchki Day. I mean, who knew? All right,
every day is Punchki Day.
Friends in Detroit, happy Punchki Day to you all. S&P futures up 11.5 off the highs of the morning, but trying to find a little bit of stability here after yesterday. This is Bloomberg.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Discover Cork with Aer Lingus when you fly from London from $55.99 each way as part of a return trip. Experience this vibrant city and head to the coast for authentic Irish seafood and stunning scenery. Smart enjoys a short break in Ireland. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at airlingus.com. Offer subject to conditions and availability.
We can't always tell, but 1 in 5 people in the UK are disabled. So when we're all heads down, stampeding and charging because we're late for the bus or train, we could be doing more harm than we think. So let's not forget about the people we share our journeys with. Let's slow down a bit. Remember, it's everyone's journey.
Switch to 5G on Vodafone. Pre-order the new Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra 5G by March 8th and get wireless Galaxy Buds Plus for free. With unlimited 5G data, you can post 108 megapixel photos and download videos impossibly fast, all on the UK's best mobile data network. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
5G subject to coverage in your area. MPerf test awarded Vodafone Best 2019 Mobile Internet Performance. Minimum term apply. See vodafone.co.uk.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. stock index futures are rising this morning after a sell-off that wiped out global equity gains for the year. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up about 13 points. Dow futures up 113. NASDAQ futures now up 69. The DAX in Germany is down 0.4%. 10-year Treasury up 1/32, yield 1.36%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.23%. 30-year yield 1.83%. 9 crude oil is down 0.25% or 14 cents at 50. $1.29 a barrel. COMEX gold down 1.5% or $25.30 at $16.5120 an ounce. The euro 1.0839 against the dollar. British pound 1.2973 and the yen 110.60. And Ian Shepherdson of Pantheon Macroeconomics says a few more sell-offs like we saw Monday, and Federal Reserve policy may be in play.
I think that the Fed is not at the point yet where they're going to pull the trigger to take sort of a precautionary action, but yeah, it could happen. I mean, I think the thing we all got to admit here is how much we don't know.
And that's Ian Shepherdson, as heard earlier on Bloomberg Surveillance. And home prices in 20 U.S. cities advancing in December by the most in nearly a year on the heels of stronger demand inventory. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Hey, Karen, thanks so much. Folks, we've been trying to speak to medical experts worldwide, particularly off London and New York and at Baylor University. And as you know, that must mean Peter Hotez joins us. He has been more than kind to join us with the Baylor College of Medicine, the National School of Tropical Medicine as well. Dr. Hotez, thank you so much for your commitment to the show. The International Journal of Infectious Diseases, this is Rosano and all, out of Italy, and the thunderous article they wrote in November of 2019 is flu and flu death in elderly is a normal occurrence. How out of normal are we right now with this virus if it seems all the research shows flu is with us at each and every moment, and particularly for those over 65?
So, first of all, thanks for having me back, and I think you've hit it, right? In fact, I'm here this morning at the Cleveland Clinic, and I was speaking exactly about that. I mean, if this coronavirus hits the United States, we've had a terrible flu season this year. Some projections are it's going to go to May, and unfortunately, Americans are not getting their flu vaccine. And then we have the added problem that historically, when we had measles epidemics, they occur late winter, early spring. Guess which time of year it is? We're moving into late winter, early spring. And the consequence of both is due to the anti-vaccine movement, which has greatly lowered our flu vaccination rates, our measles vaccination rates. So I'm very concerned in this country, as in Italy, that we could be fighting a triple epidemic, and that's a no-win proposition.
Discuss your professional view of the media and the normal public, I'm going to use this word carefully, folks, hysteria that we've seen over, say, the last 3 days about it's a crisis, we can do nothing, we cannot travel, we cannot move, et cetera, et cetera. Is there efficacy to this outrage and limitation of our moving around? Or should we try to make it life as normal even as we fight this horrific virus?
Yeah, I think in any time you see a brand new pathogen, a new virus, people get very worried very quickly. It's always the fear of the unknown. And again, the example of that is there's nothing that's much more deadly than flu or measles, and yet Americans are choosing not to vaccinate their families. And so that's one of the first thing I say. Let's at least take those two diseases off the table. Look, I mean, it is a concern, right? I mean, northern Italy is being severely affected by this, as is other pockets. Right now, you know, the World Health Organization is not calling this a pandemic. We may eventually get there, but for now, it's still confined to focal areas. So we just have to be smart about it and take the key steps to anticipate what happens if it does come to a place like the United States. And one of the most important things that I'm worried about is protecting our healthcare workers. We saw in Wuhan over 1,000 healthcare workers got infected with this virus with 6 deaths. So those are the ones that we're going to have to protect, those on the front lines, making certain that we have adequate diagnostic testing. Right now, the test that we have is not nearly good enough to routinely pick up this virus. So the key now is to be very smart and very strategic about what to do when this virus occurs and where it might occur next.
So, Dr. Hotez, just from your perspective, from the medical community, what do we know about the coronavirus and what don't we know about it?
What we know is that for many individuals, it does not produces severe infection, especially younger individuals. So we know at least 80% and probably more than that are low-grade upper respiratory symptoms resembling the common colds. But we do know that individuals who are older of underlying diabetes or hypertension are at greater risk for hospitalization and death. I mean, so one of the things we don't know is what's the story in that link between diabetes and hypertension. We don't really, and that's not only true of this virus, but of other viral infections as well. So that's a big unknown. We still don't really understand how this virus is transmitted. We know close respiratory contact is certainly a major route. If you cough or sneeze on somebody, or if those droplets get on surfaces, you come into contact with them. But we don't know, for instance, for sure, whether this virus can travel for meters out in the air like measles does. Not too many viruses, it turns out, does that. Also, we're seeing strange presentations, meaning that the Chinese have recorded several patients now who were actually admitted for abdominal symptoms and thought to have a surgical problem, and only later did it turn out they had the coronavirus, and that caused the people in the hospital to get infected.
Yeah.
So, you know, the bad news is we're still on a steep learning curve about this virus. The good news is it's only been a few weeks. I mean, I have to say, you know, compared to what happened with previous epidemics like SARS, where it took us months and months to isolate the virus, know what this virus was, we've compressed that now to a period of days and weeks. So we're learning a lot. And in some ways, the Chinese did us a favor by giving us that few-week head start so we can get ready for it here in this country.
Dr. Hotez, thank you so much. From the Cleveland Clinic today, Cleveland, Ohio. Peter Hotez, of course, of Baylor at University. Paul, this has been great. Just a major shout out to our team for pulling in these true experts from London, from UCL, from Imperial College, and of course, Dr. Hotez and Fauci and the others. It's been great.
Yeah, it's interesting. His comments about, getting a little bit of a head start here in the U.S. and the West, given that we've seen this in China. So hopefully the rest of the world can kind of prepare as best as possible.
I just put out on LinkedIn the PDF file for this Italian research. It's just, I had no idea the prevalence of flu during a normal year.
Yeah,
I was ignorant.
Dr. Hotez has an interesting commentary about folks not getting the vaccine, which is such a simple preventative measure.
The futures up 15, Dow futures up 119, the VIX
Jeff Fox here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients, and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
This is a Bloomberg. Discover Cork with Aer Lingus when you fly from London from $55.99 each way as part of a return trip. Experience this vibrant city and head to the coast for authentic Irish seafood and stunning sea. Smart enjoys a short break in Ireland. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at airlingus.com. Offer subject to conditions and availability.
Will your summer sound like this?
My train is delayed.
Or this?
Evening, everybody.
This?
Assistant required.
Or this? This? Or this?
Make it a summer of Amex and do more with American Express experiences. With exclusive pre-sale tickets for Somerset House Summer Series, Wimbledon and British Summertime in Hyde Park. Search Why Amex. Subject to availability, terms apply.
We can't always tell, but 1 in 5 people in the UK are disabled. So when we're all heads down, stampeding and charging because we're late for the bus or train, we could be doing more harm than we think. So let's not forget about the people we share our journeys with. Let's slow down a bit. Remember, it's everyone's journey.
The rules say you can't have a big 4x4 SUV that combines power with fuel efficiency. But the new Vauxhall Grandland X Hybrid 4 breaks all the rules. The smart petrol-electric hybrid engine combines 300 horsepower with up to 204 mpg. That's right, 204. Search Grandland X Hybrid and test drive now at your local Vauxhall retailer. Vauxhall. New rules Britannia. Official WLTP Grandland X Hybrid 4 test figures. For comparison purposes only, obtained using combined battery power and fuel. Real-world figures may vary.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow, along with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney, and the opening bell brought to you by SEI. With a 50-year history of innovation, SEI's outsourced solutions help achieve lasting success for investment managers, asset owners, private banks, and independent advisors. Learn more at SEIC.com. And the S&P 500 is higher at the open. It's up 0.6% or 18 points. It's at 3244. The Dow Jones Industrial average up 0.6% or 163 points at 28,132, and the Nasdaq's up 1% or 87 points at 9311. 10-year Treasury little change, yield 1.37%, yield on the 2-year 1.24%. NYMEX crude oil up 0.1% or 6 cents at 51.48 a barrel. COMEX gold down 1.6% or $27 at 16.4970 an ounce. The euro 1.0843 against the dollar, the yen 110.59. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate it. We're going to get the market open here. We got a nice pop above futures. Dow up 170 points, 28,126. The VIX comes in a solid 2 points, 22.6. This is a joy. This is the derivatives angle we've been taking, the dynamics of the market that we've been seeing over the last number of days. And now we advance the discussion. Damian Sassower called up Team Surveillance and said, just shut up and speak to him. We do. He's with Vanguard, where he does active EM. I believe that's emerging markets out of the Carnegie Mellon complex in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Dan Shikevich joins us right now with Vanguard. There's a point at Carnegie Mellon where the mortals, like, they take quantum mechanics and they don't move on from there. And others foolish enough take stochastic calculus 2 and then advanced derivative models. How does all that brain power help you when you go down 1,000 Dow points?
Well, I think the danger with too much brain power in the markets is that to be a good investor, you have to be basically exactly one step ahead of the market. If you're too many steps ahead, you never make any money, because you get stopped out before the trade works. So you got to be careful.
Part of this got to be careful is you have to re-hedge along the way. This is a huge idea that if you establish a belief, you hedge it, and you sort of get your risks in order, and then you have to redo it and redo it. Do you have a mood now that we're all getting too cute in our derivatives strategies with a great bull market? Have we just gotten a little too smart for ourselves?
I think derivatives are a tool, and I think a lot of times we tend to blame tools for problems, but it's what you do with those tools that's the problem. The tools themselves allow precision risk taking, and obviously you have to understand the risks of any instrument you use, whether it's a derivative or bond or an equity. But we are users of derivatives because it allows us to isolate what we see are the most attractive risks in the market and not take risks that we don't find as attractive.
Okay, what's critical here, Ben Laidler was with us, ex-HSBC out of London this morning, and he was looking at flows and saying, look, for X number of years, we really haven't seen the enthusiasm into equities, even though prices drive higher. Is there a humility in the derivative space right now? Do you see people making dumb moves, or is everybody still humble off of the volatility of a few years ago?
So I'm a bond guy, so I'm always a little more bearish, and I'm a little biased there. What I would say is that the markets are flush with cash. And that's something that's not going to change in the near future.
Even a virus isn't going to change that.
A virus is not going to reduce the cash amounts.
So it's interesting, Dan. So, I'm looking at the MSCI Emerging Market Index. We're down about 5% this year. Where, if I wanted to allocate some money, take a little bit of risk here, say, hey, the market's pulled back, maybe a little bit of value, I want to maybe get a little bit more aggressive, think about emerging markets, where would you suggest I go?
So what we've seen up to this point is that you've had a number of problem areas pop up. In the bond market, we've seen turmoil in Lebanon, Argentina, Ecuador, a little bit in Turkey more recently. But because the markets are flush with cash, as investors exit those markets, they're simply recycling the risks to other opportunities in the asset class. So you have the winners get richer, while the losers at this point have to reprice. Our view this year, going into this year, was that it was not going to be a market about picking winners. It was going to be in the market where you need to avoid the losers. And, while we focus on fixed income, I would be surprised if that was any different for the equity markets as well. I think this is where you look at the economies where the imbalances have been built up over a long expansion. And if you are underweight those key names, you don't have to be as defensive in your overall portfolio, and that saves you a lot of money.
There seemed to be in Q4, and I'm talking in the equity space, finally international equities started to do better. Is your sense that this virus and the supply shock that we've seen in all the GDP and economic data has shifted your EM world permanently, or is it a one-off over a time frame where you're going to see a solution to it and we'll get back on the EM recovery?
I'd be careful about putting the entire emerging markets under one umbrella. Certainly, a lot of the markets have benefited from the growth in China. That's been the case to the rest of Asia. Some of the commodity exporters in Latin America have benefited, and Eastern Europe and Central Europe have benefited through the connection through the German industrial production engine. But that said, you still have a lot of economies in the EM that are very closed, economies like Brazil or Argentina. Right. You have economies that are more linked to the U.S., such as economies, Mexico is a good example of that, or Central America. And you have other economies that have benefiting from secular changes. Eastern Europe has really been outperforming Germany as production shifts from Germany to Hungary to Serbia to Romania, and that has been keeping them afloat. So I don't think emerging markets are necessarily that much more at risk from this particular threat to global growth than anything in the developed world.
Yeah, but part of this is what we don't know out there, what Dr. Larian would call the unknown unknowns. I think of Sanford Grossman and Joe Stiglitz years ago talking about the mysteries that are out there. What's the misinformation or lack of information that you have now that concerns you? What's the thing you don't know that's on the radar?
So my concern...
No, go ahead.
Yeah, my concerns are really much more about the markets and how they behave when you have real risk to growth, but you still have this abundant liquidity. The risk there is that you don't get a lot of warning when something goes wrong. The market can be bulletproof up to a point, but once you start cracking the armor of liquidity, you can have much larger moves to the downside. So that, for me, is the biggest unknown. It's not about the economy. I think the economy is actually much more transparent than we think it is. We just tend to look at everything through the prism of the market, and the market distorts what we see because the market is so flush with cash.
Yeah, this is a fundamental theme. We heard this from UBS, really pounding the table on the wall of money. Up 170, now up 96. It's sort of the opposite of yesterday. We had some gloom yesterday, and then the tape got better in the 9:30 hour, and today we flip. We go optimism, and we've pulled it back a little bit.
I mean, certainly for those who are optimistic, the overnight price action was not particularly constructive because Asia made an attempt to rally. U.S. Treasury yields sold off. Equity futures went up. And that rally simply didn't hold when London came in.
What's your correlation right now of full faith and credit bond yields to the equity markets? Are they in step or are they acting separate?
Well, I think the correlation is strong. You know, bonds tend to rally and risk off at this point, and they tend to sell off and risk on. But they both benefit from this wall of cash. The wall of cash actually keeps bond yields lower than they would have been otherwise, and the wall of cash is keeping equities higher than they would have been otherwise.
So, Dan, when Damien comes in and sits in that seat, Damien Sessauer, who does emerging markets for Bloomberg Intelligence, he's trying to get me to buy like Lebanese sovereign debt and all this craziness. I mean, I'm willing to go a little EM on you, but talk to me about something closer to home, Mexico, Brazil. How should I think about America here?
You know, Brazil has been a great story in terms of reform, but unfortunately that reform has not yet translated into growth. So that's something that we are becoming increasingly concerned with, even though we still remain constructive. Mexico is a story where a lot of political risk has been priced in, and some of the worst case scenarios did not materialize. But we still see risk down the road. We see risks to the potential rating of the state-owned oil company that may not be able to stay in investment-grade territory. That will result in some selling. So we like Mexico sovereign as a credit. As part of our up and quality view in the market right now, but it's also priced accordingly.
Do you hedge out that currency risk when you go to some of these markets this year?
When we take local market exposure in our funds, we have the option whether we want to take or not take the currency exposure. We have felt in the last couple of months the best value was actually in the rate markets and not in the currency markets. So we have been hedging out most of our currency exposure when we do get involved in local bonds.
Dan Chekevich, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate your thoughts. Vanguard, Senior Portfolio Manager and Head of Active Emerging Markets. They do have active money at Vanguard, Tom.
Yeah, they do. They got gazillions of dollars. It's been a huge, huge success story.
Malvern, Pennsylvania.
Thank you so much. Up 170 on the Dow. Then we come down to up 96, and we're churning there right now. Yields come in a little bit off of maybe the real estate, which was on survey as well. Here's a headline. You talk about it's been a quiet virus morning with not that many headlines. This is the headline off the Bloomberg. Paul, Italy hotel in lockdown after woman tests positive to virus.
Yep, I
have no idea what that headline means.
No, but I just think we're going to see more and more of those. And the question is, are they going to be confined to Italy, or are we going to start seeing it in other countries? And I think that's kind of where the market is right now. How quickly will this spread globally? That's kind of the question of the day, it seems like.
With the news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Paul, thank you very much. President Trump held a news conference in India today as he gets ready to wrap up his 2-day trip there. The president was asked about recent reports that Russia is trying to help him win re-election.
What I'm reading, and again, I'm over here for the last number of days, but they went to see Bernie, and they told Bernie about something having to do with they want Bernie to win. They did not tell me. Intelligence never told me, and we have a couple of people here that would know very well. They never told me anything about that.
President Trump also says he's optimistic about the prospects of inking a trade deal with India. President Trump's friend and political confidant, Roger Stone, makes his bid for a new trial today amid speculation about a possible pardon. Stone returns to the court where he was sentenced just days ago to more than 3 years in prison for lying to Congress. He's hoping to convince the judge to grant him a new trial based on alleged jury misconduct. Harvey Weinstein remains in a hospital this morning after he was found guilty of rape and sexual assault yesterday. The disgraced movie mogul wasn't convicted of all of the charges against him, but could face nearly 30 years in prison when he's sentenced next month. One of the several accusers who testified against him at his new trial, Mimi Haley, tells ABC's Good Morning America about what she thinks this means for breaking the stigma of how victims report sexual assault.
It gives me hope that we're making progress, that this verdict, and I just feel like we're being educated about the reality of sexual assaults and sexual assault victims.
Weinstein is facing additional charges in Los Angeles. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul?
Michael Barr, thank you so much. Let's get a quick data check here. We're off the highs, but we're still holding some of these gains. We've got the S&P up 7.5 points, the Dow up 86, cutting about in half, kind of where we were a little bit earlier. NASDAQ up 38. Looking at the Treasury market here, the 10-year Treasury up 4/32. That's pushing that yield down to 1.357%. Not quite at the low of the day, but testing it there. The 2-year 1.23%. Let's take a look at oil. We've been following that in the face of the uncertain demand generated by the coronavirus. Got a little bit of a weakness here. West Texas Intermediate crude down about 25 cents, $51.18 a barrel. DXY a little bit weaker on the dollar here. The DXY 99.24 here. So a little bit of a weakness here. Sterling up slightly. The euro down slightly. So not much movement in the currencies right here. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Happy Fat Tuesday. And while all of New Orleans is letting the good times roll on the final day of Carnival, the most coveted product isn't beads, it's beans. Specifically Camellia brand red kidney beans, which command unprecedented devotion in the Crescent City. Even with scant nationwide distribution, Camellia is America's #1 selling red bean, according to Nielsen. Represents $61 million in annual revenue for the brand. In other food news, with 2,800 exhibitors from 20 countries, the Vin Expo trade show in Paris showcased stellar organic champagne, village wines, and pepper cordials from Ethiopia and Cameroon. But it was an amber-colored, almost velvety Sadhana single malt whiskey that wowed our critic with its delicate floral aromas and story. 3 women distill it from barley grown in a Tibetan monastery, then age it 9 years in porcelain amphora, and 6 more in oak, $90 a bottle. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
A spokesman for Iran's health ministry says the head of the country's counter-coronavirus task force has tested positive for the virus. The announcement comes a day after Iraj Harirshi gave a news conference with journalists in Tehran about the virus.
Previous administrations had no clue. They didn't know the problems. I know the problems. We're being charged large amounts of tariffs, and can't do that. Can't do that.
From India, President Trump at a news conference responds to a question on taxes placed on U.S. imports coming into India. Trump says he's optimistic about the prospects of inking a new trade deal with India. Egypt's state TV says former President Hosni Mubarak has died. Mubarak ruled the most populous Arab country for nearly 3 decades, serving as a loyal U.S. ally. Mubarak was 91 years old. I'm John Trout.
They don't just talk to the most important people.
Is it as ominous this time around?
They talk with the most interesting people.
Are they taking this seriously?
Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. stock index futures are actually U.S. stocks. They are little changed. European shares are lower as investors weigh the latest coronavirus developments following a sell-off that wiped out global equity gains for the year. Julian Emanuel says the uncertainty that was reflected in Monday's sell-off will likely lead to even lower prices in the near term.
The expectation is that you're going to bounce. And from our point of view, when you look at the action yesterday, it was a bit too orderly to expect a sustainable bounce.
And that's Emmanuel, as heard earlier on Bloomberg Surveillance. Right now, the S&P 500, again, little change. It's down a point at 32.24. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, also little changed, up 4 to 27,960. And the NASDAQ, it's up about 1/10%, up 9 points to 92.30. The 10-year Treasury up 5/30 seconds, yields 1.35%, and the yield on the 2-year at 1.22%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.6%, down 34 cents at 51.09 a barrel, and COMEX gold is down 1.2% or $20.30 at 16.5630 an ounce. The euro is at 1.0841 against the dollar, the yen at 110.39, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thanks so much. We've got market movement. I've got two headlines just out of Italy. Jordan bans flight arrivals from Italy, that according to Sky TV. And also, this is a Bloomberg headline, and I don't have any follow-up to it, but it's important to inform you of this. Italy hotel in lockdown after woman tests positive to virus. And I have no idea where that is in Italy, and just be careful with that. What I do know, Paul, is up 170, and now we've got red and green on the screen, and yields. To me, the story today, talking to Dan Shekovich moments ago, is 30-year bond now 1.8195, and the 2-year yield is speaking volumes, Paul.
Yeah, it really is. I'm looking at the 30-year down, over 1.5 basis points right now. So still, that gains we saw this morning, trying to hold on, Tom, So we'll see how it goes. Damian Sassower joins us, the aforementioned Damian Sassower. He's all that emerging market stuff from Bloomberg Intelligence, and he's trying to get me to go, sell my New Jersey munis and go long, Lebanese sovereign debt.
Let's go to the EM called Japan right now. When I say to people worldwide, using dollar yen as a litmus paper, the system, it's stronger yen in the last 20 minutes, 110.41. Translate the why of that. Why do we look at yen?
Well, look, yen has always been deemed to be the safe haven asset du jour along with U.S. yields and gold, and it's just not behaving that way due to the coronavirus and some of the noise that's attributed to that. It's interesting, I look back at the last 7 U.S. presidential elections, back to 92, Bush, Clinton, just to kind of get a sense, because now, we've got the debates, we've got everything that's going on. How has EM performed in those months leading up to the election and then afterwards? And if you just break it into rates, credit, and FX, FX is obviously the big thing we're talking about here with the yen and the dollar. What's amazing is EM currencies either rally into the election and then keep rallying, or they sell off into the election and keep selling off. And given what we're seeing right now, it doesn't bode well.
Paul, go back to Lebanon. When I started studying all this mumbo jumbo, Lebanon had one of the strongest currencies in the world. That's how much things can change. So one more question for Damien.
All right. There is no bear case for the dollar. That's my contention. Am I right?
It's hard for me. I'm hard-pressed to make a bear case for the dollar. There's no question about that. We've been talking about it for a long time. But if you do want to talk Lebanon, Tom, look, the problem with Lebanon is this. That's an economy that's been largely built on remittances from abroad, and those remittances have stopped. And basically that economy is in a really tough position right now. Obviously, they're in talks with the World Bank and the IMF to restructure their debt outstanding. I think it's about $18 billion in U.S. dollar debt outstanding. It's going to be tough. They're going to need to do a restructuring. And by the way, this isn't Argentina. They've never defaulted before, so this could be a first.
Damien, thank you so much. We've got to run to South Carolina, but Damian Sassower, just huge wisdom. And thank you for bringing Mr. Shekovich with you from Vanguard. That was very informative on true quant. We had quant corner. We can have quant corner with Kevin Cirilli. He's in South Carolina parsing poll numbers. Kevin, what parts of South Carolina support Senator Sanders?
Well, look, I think that he's going to try to put together the Hispanic coalition and replicate what he did in Nevada, but then also the more rural voters. I think The question is going to be how strong and significant is African American turnout in the cities for former Vice President Joe Biden. I mean, the expectation is not that Bernie Sanders is going to win this thing in South Carolina. The expectation is that Joe Biden is going to win big. I mean, and so you look at that, and then you head into Super Tuesday. If Biden doesn't at least meet his own clearing mark, then it's going to be very difficult for him to make the case that he should stay in this past Super Tuesday.
So, Kevin, who is, I guess, for the folks that are going to be on stage tonight, who is this debate most critical for, make or break?
I'd say Joe Biden. I'd say Joe Biden just because I think if he doesn't perform strongly in South Carolina, and then has a harmful Super Tuesday, there's going to be a lot of questions. But really all of them, in the sense everyone but Bernie Sanders. Because if you look at polls, whether it's Texas, whether it's California, I mean, he's leading. So if all of the candidates attack Bernie Sanders, then, whether it shifts the dynamic of the race, we'll have to wait and see. But up until this point, it hasn't stopped. So if you're any of the other candidates and you're hoping that there's going to be a contested convention or some type of delegate fight, then you need to keep Bernie Sanders as far away from getting 1991 delegates as possible. You need to keep him from clearing, one could make the case, 13 to 1,400, because you need there to be, it needs to be close. If he ends up getting like 1,500 delegates, how do you stop that? And I'm just not sure that they would be able to do that.
Kevin, good luck tonight. We'll look forward to that coverage on Bloomberg Radio in Boston, in Washington, in New York. Our complete coverage of the debates. Kevin Cirilli clearly leading our coverage in South Carolina, our chief Washington correspondent. Paul, we got to go back to the markets here in the time we've got left. To me, resoundingly, the thing we do on radio is the equity quotes.
Yep.
It's the bond quotes right now that really matter.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks have been saying that the bond market's been a much better barometer of the potential risk to the global economies from coronavirus. And, we still have yields pulling back here, Tom. The 30 years you mentioned earlier, 1.82 down about 1.3 basis points.
I mean, since 8 a.m., the 2-year yield has gone from a 126 down to 1.23 now. The low moments ago was 1.2248. New weakness here. It's just extraordinary.
It is. And, the question is, I've actually heard some things and read some things about, are we going to get to that zero interest rate, maybe even negative interest rates for the U.S.? I guess we're going to start hearing more about that. I just never thought it would happen. I don't think it should happen, but that's kind of where we're going here.
And dollar yen again has just spiked down. It has not gone through to new yen strength. Yesterday, in the ugliness of it, yesterday's strength for the yen was 1249, about 12 noon yesterday, and we're beginning to test that again with 110.45. And again, I would look at the virus headlines as driving this forward. I don't see it in the economic data, but it's just clearly we will monitor through the day as we can globally here at Bloomberg the different headlines, the different stories on the coronavirus. We are produced in New York by Richard Truman, Ken Fellio, in charge of playing Poco in Pure Prairie League.
Are you sitting comfortably? Is your roof cascading light in the space around you? Loving that feeling as you glide over a bumpy road? If you are, you're most certainly experiencing the advanced comfort of a Citroën SUV. If you're not, take one for a comfort drive. A test drive, but way more comfortable. Citroën C3 Aircross and C5 Aircross SUV range. Now with £500 off list price and 3 year 0% APR finance. Ooh la la! Citroën. Citroën UK Limited, acting as a credit broker, not a lender. Conditional sale. Terms, eligibility criteria and conditions apply. Guarantee may be required. PSA Finance UK Limited, participating dealer stock vehicles ordered between the 3rd and the 29th of February and registered by 31st of March.
Start hearing more of what you want. Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations, live commercial-free news, and every live NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL game. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
As members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. After 3 straight days of declines, including the big losses yesterday, stocks are rising this morning. They still have a long way to go to regain what they lost yesterday when the Dow tumbled more than 1,000 points. Some traders may be taking encouragement from news about the development of treatments, even if experts warn it would take time to build stockpiles of medicines. Home prices continued to rise at the end of 2019. The CoreLogic report shows a gain of almost 4% in December from the same month in 2018. Inventories remain lean and mortgage rates remain low. Shares of Home Depot are ringing up gains today. The company rebounded from a string of disappointing results with a fourth quarter that topped analyst projections. Net sales also beat as the U.S. housing market heated up. Harry's Razors are coming to Walgreens, their first appearance in a U.S. drugstore. The online retailer already sells its products in Target and Kroger. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
When you put together the puzzle that's today's business and political environment.
Can you make a call given this swirl of data?
Is that already being reflected in the way that they're priced?
Make sure you have all the pieces.
Which segments of Alphabet's business are most likely to come under scrutiny?
They're getting mixed signals from governments.
He's failed to gain traction. Will he have to abide by a subpoena?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Where's your views on the municipal bond landscape?
The market does not like uncertainty, does not react well to uncertainty.
There's a whole lot of optimism around the valuation of Uber.
What is Ford saying about the self-driving car?
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
Maybe we're getting hooked on debt and low interest rates.
The black hole called power could be a bigger black hole.
Only buy IPO stock that you can't get. If you can get it, it's probably a dog you don't want it.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good Tuesday morning. From New York City to our worldwide audience, we have a little bit of stability in the markets today. After that rout yesterday, equity markets up just slightly. We're going to take a look at the bond market. We've got yields grinding lower. We're going to chat coming up with the former Minneapolis Fed president, his contention that the Fed should cut rates and cut them now in response to the coronavirus. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Just crossing the terminal here. Paul, February consumer confidence has risen to 130.7 from 130.4. Meanwhile, U.S. equities came off earlier gains, but not by much. European shares remain lower as investors weigh on the latest coronavirus developments. Following a sell-off that wiped out most global equity gains for this year, treasuries are up. BTIG strategist Julian Emanuel tells Bloomberg yesterday's stock sell-off was too orderly to expect a sustainable bounce.
This type of activity in this type of uncertainty is likely going to lead to lower prices in the near term.
We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500's up 0.3% up 10. The Dow's up 0.4% up 119, and the Nasdaq's up 0.5% up 42. The 10-year's up 5/32. The yield 1.35%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 0.5% at 51.17 a barrel, with COMEX gold down 1.4% at 16.5330 an ounce. The dollar yen is at 110.40. The euro $1.841, and the British pound $1.2987. Home Depot has rebounded from a string of disappointing results with profit in the fourth quarter. The top analyst projections as the housing market heated up. The shares gained the most in 6 months, now up 1.9%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets is underway with Lisa and Paul.
Thank you so much, Greg, Jarrett. We certainly see a fluctuation in equity markets. As Julian Emanuel was trying to say, people get used to the idea of a turnaround Tuesday, and they're really trying to make that happen right now.
They are. I mean, the futures were up higher earlier, but just kind of, hanging on to some, kind of 0.3% gains in the equity indices.
Not a lot of conviction. I will say there is conviction in the bond market with new record lows on the 30-year, and looking at the 3-month, 10-year yield curve now inverted by nearly 18 basis points, the most inverted since last October. So definitely a feeling that the market is chanting right now. Cut rates, cut rates. Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks editor, joining us here in our Interactive Broker Studios. Is that basically a fair assessment that everybody is sort of trying to figure out whether they can possibly buy the dip and get some comfort here, and otherwise just seeking the safety of bonds?
Well, what you're seeing looks kind of tentative. I mean, consider how much stocks fell yesterday and how little they're rebounding today. The S&P 500 only up 0.25% or so at the moment, and that's after tumbling 3.4% yesterday. We're not talking much of a bounce here. Now, there are a couple of positives. I mean, you look at Home Depot's earnings, they went over well. Some of the other results out there pretty well received. There's a company called Keysight Technologies that has the biggest gain in the S&P 500. They specialize in electronic measuring equipment. Their numbers for the latest quarter beating estimates, they're up about 7.5%. But, you're down to isolated kinds of stories here. And, you look at the industry groups and you see the ones leading the gains. So the classic kinds of plays, the technology stocks and, communication services, which, let's not forget, is Alphabet, the owner of Google, as well as Facebook. So, this has a familiar look to it. And energy stocks are down. So are raw material producers more broadly. So, not exactly a sign of confidence here.
It's interesting about the consumer. I was just looking at those Macy's numbers. The stock's kind of unchanged, but I guess they had a better than expected fourth quarter. They're holding on to their 2020 guidance, despite maybe some of the risks from the coronavirus. So just another, nugget of information about how the U.S. consumer is kind of hanging in there.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
And it may also be another example of how companies are kind of soft-pedaling the potential effects of the coronavirus on their business, Because you think about it with Macy's. I mean, there were two potential areas where there could be issues that pop up. One is in terms of getting supplies from China, and the other is, tourism spending. Because, people come here to New York, they go to the flagship on 34th Street, and they spend money. So, you have that potential from both sides to have issues in terms of Macy's performance going forward. And then it's true for other companies. You think about Tiffany as an example. Mm-hmm. So, we'll see how things really stack up once we get a better sense of what this quarter is going to look like.
Although it's very hard to get visibility. We're already getting profit earning warnings. And honestly, it's hard to understand the scope of this when we really have a lack of a handle on exactly how far spread this coronavirus really is.
Oh, sure. And companies have been getting the benefit of the doubt lately, for the most part. We saw yesterday that it all kind of came home to roost. But here we are today. And you got MasterCard talking about the effect of the coronavirus on their business in terms of travel that's not happening, in terms of e-commerce spending that's not happening. stock's down, 1.9%, which is not nothing, but it's not kind of the extreme reaction that would suggest that, it's really, traumatic for the business here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting when you see that sell-off we had yesterday. I think ordinarily the market, a lot of people would have said, hey, in this market, what we've seen over the last several years, certainly through 2019, it's a buying opportunity. I'm not necessarily hearing that across the board. I think that this coronavirus might be something that's causing folks to say, let's just sit and wait a little bit until we learn more, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, you can argue there's been a lot of that going on lately, and in the process, we've seen records. So, now we've kind of backed off, people making something about the fact the S&P 500 is down 5% from a high of last week. And what does that mean going forward? Maybe not a whole lot in terms of further declines, depending on how things stack up relative to history. But, you put it all together and, we're kind of back trying to feel our way forward, you could argue, after the shock of yesterday's losses.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about the bond market and the commodity market, which actually you're seeing in hand the same kind of bearishness being expressed with new record low yields in the 30-year. And looking at oil now, had been trying to maintain some level of gains. It's now turned south at the lows of the session, down 0.9%. And you have to wonder what the effect is going to be on credit in the investment grade world. Everything is really golden. Right now, you're seeing investment grade bond yields at their lowest rates on record, below 2.5%, which is just sort of shocking. High yield is another story, and you're seeing the sell-off there.
Right, and we'll talk next hour about smaller companies. We're seeing those stocks go down at the same time the S&P 500 goes up.
Actually, what did you guys have? Did you guys make dinner last night?
No.
Did you make dinner?
Yeah, my son did. What am I saying?
Yeah, your son, the gourmand, the incredible. He shows me these pictures. It's ridiculous. Did you make dinner?
I didn't make dinner. My wife did.
Your wife? Okay, so I made dinner. I made salmon. It was really good. And afterwards, I had some left over, and I put it in Tupperware. And I was thinking about that this morning because I was looking at Tupperware shares, and they're tanking more than 30%, which, I guess I don't use Tupperware that much, but it was because of an accounting issue. And did you see this? They also have bonds that are absolutely plunging. They gave a profit warning. They mentioned an accounting probe, and they talked about a need for covenant relief.
And by the way, just looking at Bloomberg data, you know what their biggest market is?
China.
The Asia-Pacific region, which presumably includes China. So there you go.
So a sort of triple whammy there. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, stock down 35%. Ooh.
Yeah. Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks editor, Tupperware correspondent. Thank you so much for being with us here in our interactive brokers studios, looking right now at the market, trying to maintain those gains in U.S. equities. Hard to call it a turnaround Tuesday, considering the fact that yesterday was the worst day in more than 2 years. And we're looking at oil now firmly negative, down almost 1%. Meanwhile, in the bond market, you see that rally just continue. And really the idea here being, people have complete faith that the Fed's got the markets back.
It does, and I guess we'll see. It has up until this point. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. for World and National Headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan.
Paul, the latest now on the coronavirus. There are 80,000 cases around the world, about 2,700 deaths. The illness is showing signs of stabilizing in China, but there are indications it's getting out of control elsewhere. South Korea's infection count is near 1,000, and Iran is reporting 15 deaths and a new infection in a top health official. Spain has locked down about 1,000 people at a Canary Islands resort where an Italian tourist tested positive. President Trump says he thinks the coronavirus is very well under control in the U.S.
I think that whole situation will start working out. A lot of talent, a lot of brain power is being put behind it.
As he wrapped up a whirlwind trip to India, the president also kept pushing back at reports Russia is trying to help his re-election campaign.
Schiff leaked it, in my opinion. And he shouldn't be leaking things like that. That's a terrible thing to do.
The president's accusing House Intelligence Chairman Adam Schiff of leaking classified details that Russia's also trying to boost Bernie Sanders' campaign. Schiff denies any leaks. Heading into tonight's Democratic debate in South Carolina, the candidates are going to be looking to blunt Sanders' momentum.
Given the fact that I have been in opposition my entire career, that I've taken on every special interest, it is a little bit funny to find myself as the so-called front runner.
The Vermont senator spoke at a CNN town hall last night. He has been taking attacks from fellow Democrats for praising Fidel Castro and for giving few details on how he'd pay for trillions in new government programs. You can hear tonight's debate at 8 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio in New York, Boston, and Washington. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
Two people who are as fascinated by the markets as you are.
What's your sense of the competitive landscape in the cloud business?
Lisa Abramowitz.
People were talking about potential regulatory pressure.
And Paul Sweeney.
Are you seeing flows into ESG ETFs?
Bloomberg Markets.
What's your main conversation today with some of these corporate executives?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern.
They're spending a lot of money there.
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
To protect his home and family from disaster, Steve used courage, wisdom, and his camera phone.
That should do it.
Way to go, Steve! By simply taking digital pictures of his family's important documents, Steve can always have them stored safely online, no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
In-depth.
Switch to 5G on Vodafone. Pre-order the new Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra 5G by March 8th and get wireless Galaxy Buds Plus for free. With unlimited 5G data, you can post 108 megapixel photos and download videos impossibly fast. All on the UK's best mobile data network. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
5G subject to coverage in your area. MPerf test awarded Vodafone. 19 mobile internet performance. Minimum term applies. See vodafone.co.uk.
The rules say you can't have a big 4x4 SUV that combines power with fuel efficiency. But the new Vauxhall Grandland X Hybrid 4 breaks all the rules. The smart petrol-electric hybrid engine combines 300 horsepower with up to 204 mpg. That's right, 204. Search Grandland X Hybrid and test drive now at your local Vauxhall retailer. Vauxhall. New rules Britannia. Official WLTP Grandland X Hybrid 4 test figures. For comparison purposes only, obtained using combined battery power and fuel. Real-world figures may vary.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn. The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Lisa Abramowitz.
Are there some sectors that you want to have more or less exposure to?
What's behind this engine of gains?
Analysis of the day's Wall Street action.
The U.S. market looks relatively safe.
From Bloomberg Intelligence, Bloomberg Opinion, and influential newsmakers.
Ward McCarthy joins us right now.
B&L with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are now fluctuating here in the U.S. between small gains and small losses. European shares remained lower as investors weighed the latest coronavirus developments following the sell-off yesterday that wiped out most global equity gains for the entire year. Treasuries are higher. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is now little change, down 1. The Dow is little changed, up 14, and the NASDAQ is up 0.1%, up 9. The 10-year is up 9/32. The yield is 1.34%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 1.2% at $50.83 a barrel, with COMEX gold down 1.3% at $16.5450 an ounce. The dollar yen now stands at 110.25. The euro, $1.841, and the British pound, $1.2994. Home prices in 20 U.S. cities advanced in December by the most in nearly a year on the heels of stronger demand and lean inventory. S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller Index of Property Values increased 2.9% from the same month last year. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
The message from the bond market is very clear. They are expecting at least 2 more rate cuts from the Federal Reserve this year, possibly 3 by early next year. They are expecting inflation to go nowhere, stagflation at best, and you're seeing yields tumble to all-time lows on the long bond. Right now, we are so lucky to have Ira Jersey, Chief U.S. Interest Rate Strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us. And Ira, do you think that the Federal Reserve can afford to not cave to what markets are expecting right now, which is at least 2 more rate cuts for the remainder of 2020?
Yeah, I think it's going to get harder and harder for the Fed not to react in some way. But when you consider some of the incoming data right now, it's going to be hard for them to say, well, look, the underlying data is pretty good, and if it wasn't for these fears about the virus, then it's very possible that we'd be in pretty good economic health. And things like exogenous shocks are, especially when they come from something that's not a financial shock, it's hard for the Federal Reserve, I think, to get their arms around exactly how that impacts the economy long term. And the issue that the Fed has, just like most other developed market central banks, is that they don't have a lot of ammunition left. So if they were to cut 50 or 75 basis points this year, that doesn't leave them with a lot of room if you really have a big problem in, say, late 2021. Like, what do they do then? They can only probably ease one more time, and then they have to do, more non-traditional monetary policy measures. So I think they'd like to see how things, kind of shape up. And so March is probably out of the question, but, later in the year, if things continue to get bad, then yeah, they're going to have to cave to the market.
So Ira, I'm looking here, at the 10-year at 1.338%, that another 3 basis points today. Give us a scenario of how or when would it be possible for U.S. rates to test 0%?
You mean 10-year yields to test 0%? I mean, we've already tested it on 2-year yields, right? 2-year yields actually were quite close to 2% for the better part of a decade. But so 10-year yields getting to test 0, I think would take a lot of effort. We've done some scenario analyses around what happens potentially in a recession, and basically the whole entire yield curve would probably both flatten and also you get yields like 10-year yields closer to like 70 basis points, for example, would be kind of the level that you could potentially see. So ironically, that means that the yield curve steepens from where it is today, but still have very low interest rates in the long term. And the problem with interest rates being low is twofold. I mean, one is that savers and people on fixed incomes don't get the kind of income that they need in order to survive. So that means that they wind up reaching out into riskier assets like equities, which might actually have a dividend yield that's more. So you wind up with excess risk taking by those who can least afford to take that risk, quite frankly. And then secondly, the other problem is that it doesn't necessarily spur the lending that you need to happen because loan demand isn't picking up, right? The whole problem with like what Lisa's question was about the Fed cutting interest rates, how will interest rates help the current environment? Will people borrow more money if interest rates are lower? The answer is no. So it doesn't, which is one of the reasons why I think the Federal Reserve is going to be reluctant and not ease until they absolutely have to.
Yeah, there were a lot of sort of tongue-in-cheek comments about how, if you get a case of the coronavirus, just cut interest rates and you'll be fine. But, to your point, which is a very real point, is this a potential action that will cause more harm than good? That said, is the market setting up for a taper tantrum if the Fed doesn't deliver?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, for sure. So it's not a taper tantrum in the same way that we had in 2013, where yields went up because the Federal Reserve was stopping an activity. But you could see a significant amount of volatility in the front end of the rates market. So things like Fed funds futures, things like Eurodollar futures, and even 2-year notes might actually move quite substantially because as you mentioned, we're pricing in almost 3 cuts in a year's time. So when you're cutting, when the market's expecting potentially 75 basis points of cuts, that means things like 2-year notes would probably have to snap back maybe up to 0.5% in very short order. So you could wind up seeing quite a lot of volatility in the market.
We're going to be speaking coming up with a former Fed official, Narayana Kocherlakota, and he wrote a column for Bloomberg Opinion where he said that the Federal Reserve should cut rates prophylactically, preemptively, to sort of get some kind of growth in the economy, or at least stave off the depth of the declines that could otherwise ensue from the coronavirus. What's your response?
Well, my question to him is, how does cutting interest rates help the economy when people aren't borrowing money? At the end of the day, you need investment to pick up, and you need people to, be employed and for wages to move up. And I'm not, so I want to know what he thinks the mechanism is that interest rate cuts would help with in that regard. So I think that's the number one question. And secondly, should they do it? Can they do it? Yeah, they can. But as we've seen in the past, it's not necessarily something that ends up being good for the real economy. Just like we had, 75 basis points of interest rate cuts last year. Has that helped the real economy now? Well, it actually, when you look at the incoming data, it actually looks like it was helping. But then we wound up having an exogenous shock. And this is an exogenous shock that's, again, not financial. So since it's not financial, what can interest rate cuts really do?
Ira Jersey, thanks so much for joining us. Ira is a chief U.S. interest rate strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us from the Bloomberg Intelligence headquarters in Princeton, New Jersey. We always appreciate his comments on the bond market and on the Fed and kind of where rates are going. And, the question is, as we think about dealing with this coronavirus in the United States as it relates to any economic impact it may have, the question is, what role, if any, can the Fed do? And we'll speak more about that later this morning, certainly a topic of discussion within the U.S. Federal Reserve. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are edging higher this morning, but we have a lot of ground to make up after yesterday's sell-off. Erratic market moves suggesting investors remain on edge over the economic impact of the coronavirus. Expedia will cut 3,000 jobs to simplify what it calls a bloated organization. The cuts represent about 12% of the online travel company's workforce. Expedia didn't tie the job cuts to the effects of the coronavirus, which executives earlier this month said added uncertainty to the company's profit outlook. Intuit is buying personal finance website Credit Karma. The software giant behind TurboTax is paying $7.1 billion for Credit Karma, which offers its $100 million